Chapter 860, Clash of Demonic Tunists. Musician Bai? Sensing the excited atmosphere in the room, Zhongxian turned to Yu Fei with a questioning look. Musician Bai is a demonic tunist whom my father specially invited as a guest to our royal palace. It is said that her proficiency has already reached 6-star pinnacle, and her playing resonates deeply with one's soul. Ordinarily, only esteemed envoys of the empire have the honor of hearing her play, Yu Fei replied with an agitated look. As a 6-star demonic tunist, Musician Bai's standing in society was generally lower than her apothecary and blacksmith peers. However, the set of skills she possessed made her more desirable in royal palaces and the manners of nobility. For one, having such a talented musician in one's home could better reflect their high standing. On top of that, Musician Bai's playing had the effect of nurturing one's soul if one were to listen to it frequently. It seems like she is a performance-type demonic tunist, Zhongxian noted. Demonic tunists could be divided into two main categories: offensive and performance. Take school head Jiang Qingqin for example. As a master teacher, he shouldered the responsibility of protecting mankind and warding against the otherworldly demonic tribe. Naturally, his field of specialty for his demonic tunes focused on the offensive aspect. His playing could rattle the souls of his enemies, rendering them powerless. On the other hand, performance-type demonic tunists aimed to elevate their level of playing for non-offensive purposes. Their playing tended to possess some kind of benefit to those listening to it, and even ordinary humans could enjoy their music. Otherwise, if all demonic tunists were to leave behind a field of feathers each time they played, just like Zhongxian, those envoys in Hongyuan Empire would probably rush back to their empires and incite a war between both countries after listening to the playing. For those gathered in this main hall to be excited at the opportunity to listen to Musician Bai's playing, it went without saying that she was a performance-type demonic tunist, whose playing could soothe and pleasure one. Seeing that his daughter was still acting so intimately around that Zhongshe, Yu Shenqing said in displeasure, "Fei, come over." "Yes, father." Nodding, Yu Fei stood up and took the seat beneath her father's. A short moment later, the old eunuch, Luo Fu, returned with a beautiful, white-robed lady behind him. Her appearance might pale in comparison to Yu Fei and Luo Chichi, but her face was still one that few could tear their gazes away from. Demonic tunist by Xian pays respect to your majesty, 6th princess, and the fellow young talents here. Upon stepping into the main hall, Musician Bai immediately bowed deeply and greeted everyone present. Her voice was melodious, reminiscent of a zither, leaving a numbing sensation in one's heart. Not bad. Zhongxian nodded in approval. To be able to evoke the melody of a zither through her voice and not harm anyone despite playing a demonic tune, she did have some skills. Musician Bai, there is no need to stand on ceremony. Today is my daughter's birthday, so I would like to request a song from you to celebrate this joyous occasion, Yu Shenqing said with a smile. Yes, your majesty. Musician Bai nodded. Sitting by the side, she flicked her wrist, and a zither materialized before her. Upon seeing her zither, an excited commotion broke out amid the crowd. This must be Musician Bai's feathered eagle zither. Legend has it that Musician Bai's tamed beast, green-tailed eagle, died in the midst of trying to save her. In gratitude to her tamed beast, she forged a zither out of its feathers and even composed a song in remembrance of it. It is said that the melody harnesses the heart-wrenching sorrow she experienced upon its death, and it can evoke the same emotions in the listeners as well. I have heard of this before, too. It's said that on the day she finished composing the song, countless divine cranes wept in sadness. It was after that incident that Musician Bai's reputation spread far and wide. Countless experts in the capital considered it an honor to have heard her playing then. I didn't think that His Majesty would invite her over for Princess Yu Fei's birthday. I will be able to brag about this matter for the next 3 days when I return. 3 days. This is sufficient for me to brag for the next 3 months. Everyone could hardly keep their exhilaration in check. Offensive-type demonic tunists usually only displayed their prowess in battle, so they tended to be less famous. On the other hand, performance-type demonic tunist could easily win the hearts of others through their euphonious music, thus granting them widespread fame. Hearing the discussion of the crowd, Musician Bai chuckled lightly before placing her slender fingers on the zither and plucking on a string slightly. Tring. It was an extremely deep sound that seemed as if it had come from the ancient past, and it reverberated right within their souls. Zhong Xian's eyes immediately lit up. As a skilled demonic tunist himself, he could easily tell whether the other party was truly skilled or not. While musician Bai's level of playing might be slightly beneath that of school head Jiang's, she had embarked on a completely different path than him. Zhong Xian couldn't help but anticipate what was going to come. Trying tang. Under the light touch of musician Bai, melodious music drifted from the zither. In the blink of an eye, the crowd found themselves standing before a vast plain. Countless birds were chirping harmoniously in the surroundings, and the aroma of flowers wafted in the air. It was a pleasurable sensation. Unknowingly, everyone began to close their eyes to feel the music with their hearts. Even Shen Jun had his eyes shut, immersed in the world carved out by the music. An occupation that had been passed down through the ages, even if it was a lower nine paths occupation, should never be underestimated. Even a seemingly powerless painter, upon reaching the zenith, could bring out a fearsome army of millions at the tip of their brush, leaving powerful cultivators in despair. Seeing that she had captured everyone within her music, musician Bai chuckled softly before turning her sights to Zhong Xian. Before entering, she had already received the emperor's edict to test this young man. Trying tang, trying tanning. There was an abrupt twist in the tune. It was still a euphonic melody to the ears of others, but beneath this exterior, a powerful surge of soul energy was creeping swiftly toward a certain target. Zhong Xian was listening to the music carefully, trying to identify the main differences between a performance-type music and an offensive-type music, when his soul abruptly jolted. An offensive edge had suddenly emerged amid the music to assault his soul. How brazen! Zhong Xian swiftly dispelled the attack with his soul energy before directing a sharp gaze to musician Bai to assess her. As a 7-star demonic tunist, he could tell that the previous assault was an intentional act from her. But this was the first time the two of them had met, so there shouldn't be any grudges between them. Why would the other party attack him? Could it be that she knew that he was the succeeding principal of the Master Teacher Academy and she was trying to assassinate him? I can't discount this possibility. Too many people have told me that Hongyuan Empire isn't as peaceful as it seems, and even the elders of the Master Teacher Academy have chosen to conceal my identity until the inauguration ceremony in order to protect me as well. Perhaps danger is closer to me than I thought. Zhong Xian thought grimly. Luo Ruoxin had told him one of the pathways between the Master Teacher continent and the other worlds lay in Hongyuan City, and the otherworldly demons could exploit it to invade this land. The main purpose for the existence of the Master Teacher Academy was to keep a lookout on the passageway. Besides that, the powerful Wu Yangzi being captured by otherworldly demons and Hu Yarou concealing her own lineage. All of these events simply pointed to treacherous currents lying beneath the surface of Hongyuan City. It seemed there were many unspeakable secrets hidden in the depths of this place. Musician Bai might be a respected figure in Hongyuan City, but to assault him abruptly in the midst of her performance, there was no doubt that she was up to no good. Humph. You might stand a chance if you fight me directly, but to attempt to deal with me through demonic tunes, you have just sealed your own doom. Zhong Xian's eyes turned cold. He was only an ethereal treading realm primary stage cultivator at the moment, so if the other party had fought him in a normal battle, unless he were to bring out the Byzantium Alios beast to fight in his stead, he would be utterly crushed. But, of all things, the other party had chosen to launch her attack through demonic tunes. She was courting her own death. Even the powerful school head Jiang has acknowledged me as his teacher, yet, a performance-type demonic tunist like you dared to provoke me. You must really be tired of living. Zhong Xian slowly closed his eyes, acting as if he was immersed in the music like everyone else. However, his hands were moving elegantly to raise a wine gourd and wine cup before pouring the wine from the gourd into the cup slowly. Swoosh. It was a sound reminiscent of a stream flowing down the towering mountains or a river flowing through a peaceful valley. It wasn't too loud, but mixed amid the zither melody, it caused the other party's assault to dull. Sensing that the sound was perfectly timed to interfere during the pauses of her melody, musician Bai swiftly realized that she was facing a skilled demonic tunist. Her eyebrows shot up, and she abruptly changed her playing style. Traying tang traying trang ting traying. Her playing hastened. In an instant, the listeners felt as if a huge cavalry troop was charging across the vast plain. Dust rose in the horizon of the trembling earth as dark ominous clouds began to set in. Come at me. Having guessed that she would respond in such a manner, Zhongxian chuckled softly. Placing the gourd and cup on the table, he picked up a chopstick with his right hand and tapped it lightly on the cup, gourd, and plates intermittently. Ting. Even though they were all ceramic, so the music sounded a little monotonous, due to the food and wine in the dishes, cup, and gourd, Zhongxian was able to play different tones. Ting ting tang, ting ting tang. Limited by the tools at hand, the music Zhongxian played wasn't as rich as the other party's melody. However, each tap he made coincidentally landed on the brief pause in between each note of the zither melody, thus causing her tempo to go into chaos. If one were to compare the zither playing of a demonic tunist to ripples in a body of water, Zhongxian's every tap would be timed perfectly at each trough of the wave. Not only did he manage to interfere in the other party's playing through this, even her bodily functions, such as her breathing and her heartbeat, began moving to his rhythm. Shit, the other party is a true expert. It was at this instant that Musician Bai realized what kind of opponent she was facing, and her face paled in fear. Despite the seemingly calm showdown, a clash of demonic tunes was actually incredibly dangerous. The slightest carelessness could cause one side to lose their cultivation or even die. As the saying goes, it is the silent dog that bites. The more elegant an occupation seemed to be, the more treacherous it usually was. Taking master teachers for example, they sought to become role models and bring enlightenment to the world, a truly noble occupation. However, if one were to incur their wrath, they could become an unstoppable force that even the heavens would pale in fear before. The same went for demonic tunists. The fact that the other party could generate such power with just dining tools showed that the other party's comprehension of demonic tunes far exceeded hers, reaching a height she couldn't have imagined. If it had been on any other occasion, she would surely have clasped her fist and admit defeat before fleeing as far away as she could. However, it seemed she had gone too far in provoking the other party, such that the other party was no longer willing to let her off. The intermittent taps had already harmonized perfectly with her zither music, and she could no longer stop the fight of her own accord anymore. The moment her playing stopped, the momentum that had built up in the clash of their demonic tunes would come crashing down on her like a tsunami, and she could very well suffer a permanent impairment that would prevent her from playing another demonic tune in her life. In the worst-case scenario, her heart might even leap out of her throat, resulting in her immediate death. Damn it! Panicked, Musician Bai stood up and hastened her playing in an attempt to shake off the other party's intermittent taps. Due to her driving her zhenqi too fast, white smoke was puffing out of her head. You want to go all out? Sure, I will grant your request. Seeing the other party's playing getting even more intense, Zhongxian's eyes narrowed. He grabbed another chopstick with his left hand and began tapping it on the table. Dong dong dong. The table had been crafted out of a unique lumber that produced a deep and powerful note reminiscent of a drum. Even though he had only added a chopstick to his offense, the prowess he could exert was increased by more than twofold. Pu. From the very start, Musician Bai was already struggling under Zhongxian's counterattack. Now that Zhongxian had abruptly raised the intensity of his offense, how could she possibly withstand it? Her face paled, and a mouthful of blood spurted from her mouth. Her body flew back and struck a stone pillar in the hall. Attempting to retreat. Try it if you can. With a forceful strike on the plate, Zhongxian produced a reverberating sound reminiscent of the chiming of a bell. Pu. As if someone had struck her squarely on her chest, Musician Bai felt the zhenqi in her body running amok, and she spurted another mouthful of blood. Under the immense impact, the pillar behind her reached the limits of its durability and collapsed, and dust fell from the ceiling. Chapter 861. He is the principal? The pillar might have collapsed, but as the hall had been fortified by numerous formations, it was still holding steady for the time being. What happened? How was Musician Bai injured? What happened? In the very brief period of time since their clash started, Musician Bai had been severely injured, crashing into a pillar and causing the entire hall to shake. Due to the huge disturbance, the The crowd awakened from their trance and stared at one another with dazed expressions, confused by the situation before them. There didn't seem to be anything wrong with musician Bai's playing, so why would she abruptly spurt blood and break a pillar? She had always been famed for her good-tempered and gentle nature. Did a screw fall from her head today? What happened? Taken aback, Yu Shenqing swiftly turned his gaze to Zhongxian. As the one behind the matter, he knew that musician Bai's bizarre actions definitely had something to do with the young man's use of chopsticks to tap on cups and plates. Are they fighting with one another? Yu Shenqing frowned doubtfully. Didn't I instruct musician Bai to check if Zhongxian possesses any exceptional means to do with souls? Why did they suddenly start fighting with one another instead? Wait a minute. Could it be that Zhongxian is a demonic tunist as well? As the only ones who knew that Zhongxian had taken the demonic tunist examinations were the student worker at the demonic tunist aula, school head Jiang, and vice school head Ning, this piece of news was missing from the intelligence Yu Shenqing had received from his men. However, with Zhongxian knocking on the table and the plates, the truth couldn't be any more apparent to him. Yu Fei turned to Yu Shenqing and said anxiously, "Father, Zhongxian is my guest. If anything happens to him, it will reflect badly on the royal family." Even though she had no idea why musician Bai would make a move against Zhongxian, she knew that her father was definitely involved in this matter. Yuan, knowing that his daughter's words rang true, Yu Shenqing nodded grimly. Turning to musician Bai, he said, "Musician Bai Xian, please stop." Yu Shenqing was unaware of the dangers involved in the clash of demonic tunes, so he thought that Bai Xian was still carrying out his orders, oblivious to the fact that she was in a desperate situation herself. Hearing Yu Shenqing's words, Bai Xian was just about to explain the situation to him when the sound of Zhongxian's tapping sounds assaulted her once again. Under the furious onslaught, she had to put her everything into playing her zither just to fend off Zhongxian's offense, leaving her with no additional energy to speak. Deng 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 deng. The immense pressure she was placed under left her retreating uncontrollably, and every step that she took left a half-kai one deep footprint in the ground. Peng. Eventually, she found herself backed against the wall of the main hall. The fortification formation behind her glowed, obstructing her path, and her footsteps came to a halt. Feeling the support behind her, Bai Xian heaved a sigh of relief. In that instant, an idea suddenly came to her mind. With her back pressed against the wall, a smile emerged on her face as her crimson lips parted. "His blue robe flutters in the wind, my heart wanders into the distance. Even if fate permits me not to be with you, is silence the only word you offer me?" It was a song filled with remembrance. Even though it was filled with nostalgia, leaving one in a pensive trance, Zhongxian's eyebrows shot up, and he abruptly got to his feet. The other party was already on the verge of collapsing to his demonic tunes, but with the support of the fortification formation cast on the room, the other party had actually managed to neutralize his offense. To put it simply, formations could be defined as the gathering of spiritual energy in specific positions in order to produce unique effects such as calling forth sword chi to attack one's opponents or a mysterious fog to beguile others. The essence of fortification formations lay not in making an infrastructure stronger but by neutralizing the attacks conducted on it, similar to a sponge. Once the force was neutralized, naturally, the object fortified wouldn't suffer any damage. By hiding within the fortification formation, Zhongxian's offense would be weakened by it, which gave the other party room to counterattack. As the saying goes, the sorrow of fond remembrances breaks the soul. If Zhongxian couldn't counter the other party's singing, he could lose his life. In just a short moment, by utilizing the fortification formation, the other party had managed to turn the tables on him, and he fell into an extremely disadvantageous position. Indeed, there is no occupation that should be underestimated. But even though Zhongxian was in a disadvantageous position, there wasn't the slightest trace of anxiety or nervousness to be seen from him. Instead, with a light chuckle, he smacked the table, and the cup filled with wine flew up. "A fine song indeed. Allow me to propose a toast to musician Bai." His voice was also infused with the power of a demonic tune, instantly neutralizing the other party's singing. The next instant, he flicked the wine cup with his finger. The direction the wine cup was heading toward wasn't musician Bai but the wall beside her. Dang lang. Upon coming into contact with the wall, The wine cup immediately burst apart, shattering into numerous pieces before falling down. However, what was astonishing was that instead of falling to the ground, the broken shards suddenly stopped in midair. Wang. In the next instant, as if someone had stopped them at their cores, the fortification formations in the main hall suddenly came to a halt. When Zhongxian had first arrived in the room, he had already taken a look at the various formations using his eye of insight, so he knew where the weaknesses of the formations were. The wine cup he had flicked over was infused with his junqi, and even though it might seem as if the broken shards had parted in random directions, it was actually all under his control. Through manipulating the shards precisely, he managed to stop all of the fortification formations simultaneously. It followed the same principles as his formation-destroying kick. The formation has been halted. This is bad. Noticing the changes in the room, Yu Shenqing was alarmed. He had been waiting for musician Bai to stop when the latter abruptly started singing. Before he could process what was going on, Zhongshe had already stood up and thrown the wine cup, and the formations had come to a sudden stop right after. As if a déjà vu had struck him, he immediately stood up to intervene in the matter. But again, before he could do anything, musician Bai, with the loss of the support from the fortification formation, succumbed to Zhongxian's assault, and with a frenzied spurt of blood, she was sent flying backward once more. Hong Long. This time, without the additional protection from the formation, how could the wall behind her endure such immense force? In the blink of an eye, it had already collapsed into a pile of rubble. Jiyaya. The main hall was only supported by 4 pillars. It had lost one just a moment ago, and with another wall face collapsing, the entire room's support became extremely unstable. With a loud rumbling, the ceiling came crashing down. Damn it! Yu Shenqing felt as if he was losing his mind. That fellow was really a god of destruction, collapsing everything that he came into contact with. He had gone to the extent of inviting formation masters to heavily fortify the main hall, but it eventually still met with such an outcome. Are you here to attend Yu Fei's birthday banquet or to demolish our buildings? But knowing that this wasn't the time for that, he exerted his powerful junqi to hold up the collapsing ceiling so as to protect those in the room. As a Saint Realm 1 Dan Pinnacle expert, even if he was unable to undo the damage done to the building, he could at least break the fall of the collapsing rubble. No matter what, it was his daughter's birthday. The main hall might have collapsed, but he couldn't allow any of those young talents to be injured due to it. Otherwise, what would this say about the royal family? Pardon me. After knocking musician Bai out, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief and clasped his fist elegantly. If the other party had fought with him as a cultivator, he might have suffered a tragic loss. But to challenge him to a battle of demonic tunes, that was pure foolishness. After that, Zhongxian turned to Yu Shenqing and said with a righteous aura, "Your Majesty, I am a master teacher recognized by the Master Teacher Pavilion, and yet, musician Bai over here secretly attacked me during her playing. It is clear that she is up to no good. I suspect that she is involved with the otherworldly demonic tribe. I ask of your Majesty to apprehend and interrogate her for the safety of the citizens of Hongyuan City." Otherworldly demonic tribe. Hearing those words, Yu Shenqing nearly keeled over. I am the one who asked her to test you. How did the otherworldly demonic tribe get into the picture? Furthermore, I haven't settled the grudge with you for messing up my daughter's birthday banquet. How can you be so shameless as to dare speak up in such a righteous tone? If your Majesty doubts my word, I beseech you to allow me to invite Pavilion Master Mo over to look into the matter. Seeing Yu Shenqing's silence, Zhongxian thought that the other party might be doubting his words due to his long years of friendship with musician Bai, so he made another suggestion. On the other hand, hearing that Zhongxian was going to involve even the Master Teacher Pavilion in this matter, Yu Shenqing nearly erupted in rage. Musician Bai was only testing you to see if you are a soul oracle by my order. Not only did you knock her out, you even destroyed my building, so how can you still speak so boldly? Flinging his sleeves furiously, Yu Shenqing harumphed coldly. Today is my daughter's birthday banquet, but you messed up this joyous occasion with your antics. Regardless of whether musician Bai attacked you or not, the royal palace welcomes you no more. Leave. Even though Yu Shenqing was so angry that he could kill, in the face of the crowd before him, he still had to uphold his bearings as an emperor. Furthermore, the other party was a master teacher, so he dared not go overboard. You are asking me to leave? Not expecting the other party to not interrogate the culprit who had attacked him and instead order him to leave, Zhongxian frowned in displeasure. That's right. From today on, I prohibit you, Zhongxian, from stepping onto the grounds of the Hongyuan royal palace. You are no guest of our royal family. Yu Shenqing bellowed authoritatively. If he could, he would have issued an even harsher punishment. However, Zhongxian had a close relationship with several schoolheads of the Master Teacher Academy, so he dared not go too far. Father. Not expecting such a situation to evolve out of her birthday banquet, Yu Feiya hurriedly turned to her father to plead with him. Speak no more. I have made up my mind. Yu Shenqing waved his hands decisively. What are you waiting for? Did you not hear His Majesty's words? Seeing that Zhongxian had incurred the emperor's anger, Shenjun almost burst into laughter. He swiftly stood up and bellowed at Zhongxian, making use of this opportunity to vent his anger. Fine. To think that he would be asked to leave like that, Zhongxian had no other words to say. He would have already left had it not been Yu Feiya's birthday banquet. Shaking his head, he turned around and walked out. Teacher, wait for me. After shooting a glance at Yu Feiya, Luo Chichi quickly followed behind Zhongxian. Zhongsha. Not expecting an unpleasant event like this to happen at her birthday banquet, Yu Feiya's complexion turned awful. Clenching her jaw, she rushed forward to Zhongxian's side as well. Feiya. Seeing his daughter leave with Zhongxian, Yu Shenqing's expression turned so livid that it seemed as if one could squeeze ink from it. Rage clouded his mind, and just as he was about to command his subordinates to capture Yu Feiya and bring her back, the old eunuch standing by the side of the room, Luo Fu, suddenly flicked his wrist and took out a jade token. Taking a look at it, his face suddenly warped in astonishment. Luo Fu immediately rushed up to Shen Yuqing and called for him with lips quivering in fright. Your Majesty. What's wrong? Yu Shenqing asked impatiently. We have just received news regarding the identity of the succeeding principal of the Master Teacher Academy. Luo Fu told Yu Shenqing telepathically, not daring to speak aloud. Who is it? Lu Feng? Or is it Zhao Bingshu? Yu Shenqing asked anxiously in response. Yu Feiya's matter might be important, but getting on good terms with the succeeding principal was even more so. After all, the latter concerned the future of the Yu clan, whether it would rise to greater heights or fall into decline. Your Majesty, it is neither of them. The succeeding principal is ZH. Zhongxian. Luo Fu's voice was shaking in fear. Zhongxian? The man who has just walked out. Zhongxian? Yu Shenqing suddenly felt as if the sky had collapsed on him. Yes, Your Majesty. Luo Fu hurriedly nodded. Without any hesitation, Yu Shenqing got his feet and rushed out of the room. Zhongsha, don't leave. I think there is some kind of misunderstanding between us. Shenjun. The crowd. Chapter 862, Yu Shenqing's regret. Hong Long Long. Shortly after Yu Shenqing left, the zhunqi propping the ceiling up disappeared, and the room collapsed entirely. Debris flew randomly in the area, and a cloud of dust rose in the air. The young talents swiftly rushed out of the room. Glancing at the rubble and the emperor who was busy running as he shouted misunderstanding, they found themselves completely stupefied. What has happened to His Majesty? Liu Quan muttered in a daze. It was just moments ago that he had domineeringly commanded for the other party to leave the royal palace and never return, but in the blink of an eye, he was suddenly chasing the other party, claiming that it was all just a misunderstanding. Could anyone have a change of mind faster than him? How would I know? Shenjun was bewildered by the bizarre turn of events as well. When he'd seen Yu Shenqing lashing out at Zhongxian, he had stood up to berate the other party as well. However, with Yu Shenqing abruptly changing his mind, his actions suddenly became a joke. Placed in an awkward position, he had no idea whether he should stay or just leave. So, are we still going to teach that fellow a lesson? Liu Quan asked hesitantly. Even the emperor had chased the other party, screaming that it was a misunderstanding. Was it really fine for them to teach the other party a lesson? Of course. However, just in case, we shall find a few outsiders to do the job for us. As long as they can't trace the matter back to us, it will do. Shen Jun said with a glint in his eyes. If Yu Shenqing had maintained his hostility toward Zhongxian, he wouldn't have viewed the latter as a threat to him. Ultimately, as a princess of Hongyuan Empire, Yu Fei's marriage was still dictated by her father. As long as her father opposed it, there was no way she could get together with Zhongxian, no matter how close the two of them were. However, Yu Shenqing had suddenly changed his attitude and run out to pursue Zhongxian, seemingly seeking reconciliation with the latter. In that instant, he felt the weight on his shoulders intensifying. Since that was the case, he would have to make sure to pummel the thought of marrying Yu Fei out of Zhongxian first. While the duo was discussing how they should deal with Zhongxian, Yu Shenqing had already reached the entrance of the royal palace. There, he only saw Yu Fei and Luo Chichi standing in the vicinity, and Zhongxian was nowhere to be seen. Yu Shenqing rushed forward to ask, "Where is Zhongshe?" He might be the emperor of Hongyuan Empire, but Zhongxian, as the principal of the Master Teacher Academy, possessed far greater influence than him. If he were to really offend Zhongxian, all the other party had to do was declare that the Master Teacher Academy would no longer protect the royal family, and the era of the Yu clan would come to an end in less than half a month. The main reason the Yu clan had been able to retain control over Hongyuan Empire for so many years wasn't due to its strength but in deference to the Master Teacher Academy. Under the watchful gaze of the Master Teacher Academy, there was no one who would dare to brazenly initiate a coup d'état. On top of that, while the presence of the Master Teacher Academy had raised the national power of Hongyuan Empire, it had also made Hongyuan Empire reliant on it. Out of 100 officials possessing a cultivation level at the ethereal treading realm or above in the royal court, 99 would be indebted to the Master Teacher Academy in one way or another. If a falling out were to occur between the Master Teacher Academy and the royal family, most would choose to side with the former. As such, even though he, as the emperor, possessed an unparalleled standing in Hongyuan Empire, he still dared not cross the principle of the Master Teacher Academy. This was reality. He had thought that Zhongxian was only an insignificant figure in the Master Teacher Academy. Even if the latter had won the admiration of several schoolheads, there was still no need to fear him as his standing was equivalent to the 10 great master teachers. But who could have known that he would be the succeeding principal? Furthermore, he was nominated unanimously by the 10 great master teachers and Mu She. Realizing what he had just done, Yu Shenqing immediately rushed out to seek reconciliation with Zhongxian. Teacher said that he has matters to attend to, so he left first. Luo Chichi said. He has left. Yu Shenqing was stunned. Father, Zhongshe is my benefactor. Just how did he offend you that you had to send musician by after him? Yu Fei questioned her father angrily, unable to stand it any longer. The others in the room might not be aware of what had happened, but as a talented soul cultivator, she was able to tell that it was musician Bai who had made the first move, and Zhongshe had only retaliated out of rage. It was clear that her father was behind this matter, otherwise there was no way that musician Bai would dare make a move on a guess. Yu Shenqing had no idea how he should explain this matter to his daughter. After a moment of silence, he decided to come clean. Before the start of the banquet, someone cleared our 1,000-tempering soul passageway at an unprecedented speed, devoured all of the spiritual energy within the soul-tempering hall, and destroyed our ancestral statues. I suspect that it was Zhongshe's doing. Impossible. Ever since arriving at the royal palace, teacher has been with me, so how could he have caused destruction in the soul-tempering hall? Luo Chichi shook her head. I suspect that the culprit behind the destruction in the soul-tempering hall is a soul. Didn't Zhongshe fall into a daze earlier on? Yu Shenqing asked. The reason he was in a daze was because he had just found out that today is my birthday, and he was creating a soul cultivation technique for me. Interjected Yu Fei upon hearing her father's words. Upon recalling this matter, her eyes couldn't help but redden. As she hadn't informed Zhongshe that it was her birthday, the latter had probably only learned of it after arriving at the main hall. Yet, he still devoted his effort to creating a cultivation technique for her as a gift. But, he was still misunderstood like this. In fact, he had even been assaulted in the midst of the banquet. Wouldn't his heart break from indignation? Creating a cultivation technique? Yu Shenqing was surprised to hear those words. That's right. Let me write down the cultivation technique for you so that you can see for yourself whether or not a person who created such a cultivation technique within a few hours could still have the time to wreak havoc in the soul-tempering hall. Gritting her teeth, Yu Fei took out a brush and a book and swiftly wrote down the set of cultivation techniques that Zhongshe had imparted to her. Taking the book, Yu Shenqing had barely read half a page when his body suddenly stiffened. Embarrassment flooded his face in the form of a crimson glow. The set of soul cultivation techniques detailed in the book was extremely formidable, even more powerful than their 1000-tempering soul refinement art. Even for a master teacher of Musha's caliber, it would take at least several decades to compile a technique like that. To create it on the spur of the moment, the other party must have put a lot of effort into it. And yet, he had actually suspected the other party of destroying the soul-tempering hall. In that instant, he felt as if he was an ingrate. This cultivation technique is tailored perfectly for the constitution of our Yu clan. After browsing through the entire book, Yu Shenqing felt so ashamed of himself that he was tempted to dive into a burrow. The cultivation technique was built upon the special constitution that the members of the Yu clan possessed, so outsiders were incapable of cultivating it. Thus, it was not even a possibility that this set of cultivation techniques had been taken from elsewhere. If the members of their clan were to cultivate such a profound cultivation technique, the overall prowess of the Yu clan would be raised by at least 30%. Putting aside a soul-tempering hall, the value of this cultivation technique was worth at least a half of the entire royal palace. In order to create such a profound cultivation technique, it was inevitable that the other party would have to fall into deep thought. Yet, he doubted the other party and had someone test him out, even demanding that he leave eventually. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that he had gone overboard. Yu Shenqing turned around and commanded, "Luo Fu, didn't Zhongshe's manor collapse? Send the best craftsman in the empire to fix it immediately. Before daybreak, I want to see a manor that is even grander than the royal palace." Yes. The old eunuch hurriedly left to have the matter done. A huge manor like Zhongshen's would surely cost a bomb to repair and refurbish, but so what? As long as they could repair their relationship with Zhongshen, it would be worth the expense. Oblivious to Yu Shenqing's intentions, Zhongshen finally reached Leiyuan Peak. The mountain peak was covered in a thick layer of snow, creating a chilling atmosphere. He entered the straw cottage where he first met the Byzantium Alios beast and sat down. It was still some time before the Xiao and Hu Yarou and the others hadn't arrived yet. He could make use of this time to impart the ethereal treading realm Heaven's Path soul art to his clone to allow him to raise his cultivation as well. The clone appeared in the room and called out, "Main body, what happened back then when you were disguising as Yangshe? How did the teacher acknowledgement hall collapse as well?" Zhongshen asked. The last time Zhongshen had met his clone was when the latter had appeared as Yangshe. As everything had happened too quickly, he didn't have time to process everything his clone had done before the latter was returned to the myriad ant hive nest, thus breaking the telepathic connection between them. As such, there were still certain aspects of the incident back then that he was unsure of. It was an effect created by Vicious through the use of Kongshe's writing, the clone responded. In that instant, Zhongshen seemed to see everything fall into place. His deduction hadn't been too far off. Through utilizing Kongshe's handwriting, Vicious had not only strengthened his aura, he had also managed to conceal the killing intent in his aura, converting it into a more orthodox and righteous form. It was through borrowing Vicious' strength that his clone suddenly became so formidable, suppressing Musha and the 10 great master teachers to the point that they dared not utter a word. With a flick of his wrist, Zhongshen took out of the Book of Heaven's Path, where Vicious was sealed, and Kongshe's writings. "I performed well, didn't I? See, I wasn't lying when I said that I would definitely be of great help to you if you were to let me devour Kongshe's writings." As soon as Vicious saw Zhongshen, he immediately began claiming credit for his accomplishment. "Devour Kongshe's writings? Dream on." Shaking his head, Zhongshen opened up the scroll containing Kongshe's writings when he abruptly froze. Astonished, he exclaimed, "What is this?" In the bamboo scroll, several hundred words of the initial 3000 had gone missing, leaving behind a smooth surface in their place. It was as if those words had never existed at all. But he had definitely seen those words before, even undergoing the soul tempering of a mentor's calligraphy due to them. If you didn't let me devour those words, how could I possibly have produced such a powerful aura capable of destroying even formations and buildings? Vicious replied. Devour. You devoured those words. Zhongxian felt the world spinning around him. He had known that his clone was not a person he could rely on, but who knew that the other party would allow Vicious to do something like that? That is Kong Shi's personal handwriting. On top of that, a cultivation technique is hidden within it. With a portion of it devoured by this fool, how am I going to uncover the secret hidden within it? That's right. Vicious nodded blankly, not understanding why Zhongxian was making such a huge fuss. On the other hand, hearing Vicious admit to the matter, Zhongxian was on the verge of tears. There was no master teacher who wouldn't treasure Kong Shi's handwriting as if it was their life and pass it down to their descendants as a family heirloom. Yet, Vicious had actually devoured it. How he was supposed to face Kong Shi if he were to meet the other party again in the future? Just what was with this matter? But what was done was done. There was no use blaming those two anymore. Furthermore, the situation he had been facing then was extremely tricky, and there was no guarantee that he would have been able to get out of it without Yang Shi's appearance. Sighing deeply, Zhongxian turned his gaze back to the bamboo scroll. Around a third of the words had disappeared, which meant that he could recreate the effect back in the Elder Hall another 2 times. Forget it, it shouldn't matter anyway. Zhongxian shook his head as he consoled himself. Kong Shi's cultivation technique might be formidable, but as the cultivator of the Heaven's Path divine art, it didn't matter whether he obtained it or not. Stowing the bamboo scroll and Vicious back into his storage ring, Zhongxian imparted the ethereal treading realm cultivation technique to his clone before leaving his clone to cultivate using the earth vein spirit essence. Once this was done, Zhongxian found himself with some additional time on hand, so he decided to take a look at his current strength. At the moment, his soul cultivation had already reached ethereal treading realm pinnacle, granting him a might of 20 million ding. Factoring in the 17 million ding from his zhenqi and 8 million ding from his physical body, he wielded a total might of 45 million ding. In other words, his strength was on par with a half-saint primary stage cultivator. For an ethereal treading realm primary stage to be able to rival a cultivator 2 realms stronger than him, probably not even the famed combat masters were capable of such a feat. While checking on his body, he also noticed that his soul, with the recent breakthrough, was getting a little too powerful for his body, so he would have to slow down his soul cultivation for the time being. After waiting a moment longer, Zhongxian heard the sound of aerial spirit beasts outside. Knowing that Hu Yarou and the others had arrived, he quickly hid his clone in the myriad anthive nest and left the Byzantium Alios beast at the back of the straw cottage before heading to the entrance to meet the others. Chapter 863, Sabertooth Spirit Tiger Zhongshi. As soon as he headed back to the entrance of the straw cottage, he saw Hu Yarou, Shui Zhenyang, and the others stepping off the back of a massive spirit beast. Half a month ago, they had still been the domineering and powerful leaders of the 4 most powerful student factions in the academy. However, at this moment, as if little chicks meeting a mighty eagle, they were devoid of the arrogance that they held before, and a hint of fear could be felt from their body language. They might still be considered rivals from before, but at this instant, they had become nothing more than juniors to him. They couldn't pull their weight before him even if they wanted to. Zhongshi, are you ready to set forth now? Hu Yarou asked. Yuan Zhongxian nodded. Great. Let's get on the spirit beast then. Hu Yarou beckoned Zhongxian onto the spirit beast that they had been riding on a moment ago as she prepared to leap on herself. Let's ride on another one, that one over there is too slow. Zhongxian shook his head as he sent a signal through his mind. A moment later, an ape-like saint beast emerged from the back of the straw cottage. Senior Byzantium Alios? The old principal's tamed beast. Didn't Senior Byzantium Alios go missing? Hu Yarou, Shui Zhenyang, and Long Tsungyue leaped in shock as they stared at the young man before them as if they were gazing at a monster. They were all direct disciples of the school heads of the Master Teacher Academy, so they were privy to the news regarding Senior Byzantium Alios's disappearance as well. How could he be with Zhongshi? Furthermore, from the looks of it, the relationship between the two of them didn't seem to be simple. In contrast to the shock of the others, Dongxin remained composed. She had personally seen how senior Byzantium Aelios had addressed him as master, and she also knew that the 10 great master teachers and Musha had nominated the young man before her as the next principal as well. However, due to the grave importance of this matter, she didn't reveal it to anyone. If we ride on him, we should be able to obtain the scarlet firefly fruits and return within 3 days, said Zhongxian, before turning to the Byzantium Aelios beast and instructing, Byzantium Aelios, we will be counting on you. Yes, Master, the Byzantium Aelios beast nodded. With crisp echoes from the bones throughout its body, its physique immediately grew threefold, turning its originally large physique into something resembling a mini mountain. After which, it walked forward to take the room on top of Dongxin's spirit beast and placed it on its back. Let's set off, Zhongxian said as he leaped onto the Byzantium Aelios beast's back. On the other hand, watching as the old principal's saint beast of the academy turn into a mount, Hu Yarou, Shui Zhenyang, and Long Tsungyue were completely flabbergasted, and they couldn't help but think that either the world had gone mad or they hadn't awoken from their dreams yet. They had heard of how prideful senior Byzantium Aelios was, so it was hard to believe that not only would he acknowledge Zhongxian as his master, he would even, willingly serve as a mount. Even though they were witnessing the sight personally with their own eyes, they couldn't help but find it inconceivable. Even after they had entered the room on the Byzantium Aelios beast's back and soared into the clouds, they were still unable to recover from the blow. After a long moment of silence, Shui Zhenyang suddenly recalled something and exclaimed in astonishment, "My teacher told me that the person who found senior Byzantium Aelios would be the next principal of our academy." His teacher, Xu Changqing, was the head of the martial arts school. The other party had once told him that Musha had spread the word that he would decide the succeeding principal based on whoever found the Byzantium Aelios beast first. For the Byzantium Aelios beast to have acknowledged Zhongxian as its master, could it be that I was forced into it? Sigh, I wouldn't have accepted it if there was any other way around it. Seeing that Shui Zhenyang had figured it out, Zhongxian thought that there was no need to hide the matter from them, so he shook his head with a sigh. If it wasn't for the principal's privilege to access all of the books available in the academy, he would have never accepted this troublesome role. As the principal, his actions would be publicly scrutinized, and any problem that occurred in the Master Teacher Academy would be attributed to his incompetence. It was not as if this was anything good, so there was no need to make a huge fuss over the matter. You were forced into it. You wouldn't have accepted it if there was any way around it. Hu Yarou, Shui Zhenyang, and Long Tsungyue rolled their eyes upon hearing Zhongxian's words. It is actually possible to be forced into becoming the principal of the Master Teacher Academy? Why can't such fortune come to us instead? We would have loved to be forced into it as well. Putting the matter aside for the moment, Zhongxian turned to Hu Yarou and instructed, Hu Yarou, show me your battle technique. Since he had promised Wu Yangzi to take care of his descendant, he had no intention of reneging on his words. All right. Knowing that Zhongxian was going to offer her some pointers, Hu Yarou nodded and began executing her strongest battle technique. A moment later, after gaining a thorough understanding of the flaws in Hu Yarou's cultivation, Zhongxian began offering her some pointers. It must be said that Hu Yarou was a rare gem. Not only was she knowledgeable, she possessed extraordinary talent, and the foundation of her cultivation was extremely stable as well. With Zhongxian's guidance, she improved swiftly, especially in the field of terpsichorean arts. With her alluring figure, even a half-saint expert could be left in a trance after watching her dance. Hu Yarou's rapid improvement had left the others with an itch in their hearts, and eventually, they could no longer hold back the urge to consult Zhongxian. Zhongxian also offered them his pointers without any reservations, and the other three improved swiftly as well. While they were still a significant stretch from making the breakthrough to half-saint, they did manage to further reinforce their cultivation. In their current states, as long as they were to obtain the scarlet firefly fruit, it was almost a certain that they would be able to make a breakthrough. Half a day passed in a flash. By the time they were arriving in the vicinity of the scarlet firefly fruit, the sun had just begun to rise from the eastern horizon. Even though it was in line with Zhongxian's estimation, he still couldn't help but be amazed by the Byzantium Aelios beast's speed. As expected of a Saint Tudan spirit beast, Its speed and endurance were truly on a different level from spirit beasts. Let's stop here. Under Dongxin's directions, the Byzantium Alios beast landed right outside a mountain valley. Senior Byzantium Alios, I think it would be best for you to remain here. The scarlet firefly fruit is guarded by 2 spirit beasts, and if they sense your presence by any chance, I fear that they might destroy the fruit out of desperation after realizing that they won't be able to maintain possession of it, Dongxin said. The instincts of a spirit beast should never be underestimated. The moment they sensed the Byzantium Alios beast's presence, they might choose to take a position close to the scarlet firefly fruit and hold it hostage, threatening to destroy it should they approach. That would put them in an extremely disadvantageous position. I also don't think that it is a feasible plan to get past those 2 spirit beasts by brute force. Due to our lower cultivation, they won't view us as a huge threat and will be less wary around us. Our best shot at obtaining the fruits is to exploit their possible negligence toward us to sneak past their defense and obtain them discreetly, Long Tsungyue said. This was the plan they had derived after many rounds of discussion based on the intelligence they had gathered. Otherwise, they could have simply invited any of the elders over to help them overpower those 2 spirit beasts. There was no need for them to seek help from a nemesis. I am confident at masking my presence such that they won't be able to find me, the Byzantium Alios beast said assuredly. As a Saint 2 Dan Saint beast, it was an easy feat for it to conceal its aura from spirit beasts. It isn't that easy. Take a closer look at the valley ahead, Dongxin said grimly. The valley. Zhongxian and Byzantium Alios beast turned their sights to the valley ahead. The valley was extremely narrow, reminiscent of a sealed box. Perhaps due to the presence of the scarlet firefly fruits, it was rich in spiritual energy, reminiscent of a blessed land. The first thing that the duo noticed upon looking into the valley was that it was filled with a particular flower. The flower carried a tinge of red, as if embarrassed to be looked at. A certain plant surfaced in Zhongxian's mind, and deep frown emerged on his face. Are those crimson koi flowers? The crimson koi flower was similar to the mimosa in his previous life. Upon coming into contact with foreign objects, it would change its color depending on the strength of the intruder. In other words, it would change into a differing color should a saint approach the valley. This was also why this flower was a common ingredient in formulating medicine used to gauge the cultivation of an individual. Indeed, those are crimson koi flowers, Dongxin said with a bitter smile. I see. Zhongxian nodded. The crimson koi flowers were extremely sensitive plants. Even if the Byzantium Alios beast was able to conceal its aura perfectly, the flowers might still be able to gauge its true strength through its movements and other aspects. Of course, it was unlikely for the 2 spirit beasts to destroy the scarlet firefly fruits just because a Saint Realm expert was in the area, but this was a risk that they couldn't afford to take. After getting a clearer glimpse of the situation, Zhongxian waved his hand and instructed, Byzantium Alios, you should rest for the time being then. Don't worry, nothing bad will happen. Besides, it won't be too late for you to make a move if we really encounter danger. Yes, Master, the Byzantium Alios beast replied. After which, it flew into the distance, and once it was out of sight, it returned to the myriad ant hive nest. Given Zhongxian's current strength, there was no cultivator beneath Half-Saint that was a match for him. Besides, he could keep the Byzantium Alios beast by his side via the myriad ant hive nest and release it immediately if they encountered a difficult situation, so there was nothing to worry about. Let's enter. Without any hesitation, the group began heading into the valley. As soon as they stepped into the valley, a ripple of color began to spread across the scarlet koi flowers, as if transmitting information of some kind. What are the spirit beasts guarding the scarlet firefly fruits? Zhongxian asked as the group advanced deeper into the valley. They are both Chrysalis Realm Pinnacle Sabertooth Spirit Tigers, Hu Yao Yao replied. Sabertooth Spirit Tigers? No wonder. Zhongxian nodded in realization. It was not without reason that the Sabertooth Spirit Tiger was famed as the strongest spirit beast beneath Half-Saint. Even though they were Chrysalis Realm Pinnacle experts as well, Hu Yao Yao and the others were hardly a match for a single Sabertooth Spirit Tiger, let alone 2. Defended by those 2 spirit beasts, it would indeed be extremely tricky to get to the scarlet firefly fruits. Of course, this wasn't a problem for Zhongxian. If a fight were to really occur, he could easily settle it with 2 punches. That isn't the only problem. Those 2 saber-tooth spirit tigers are very cunning too. Regardless of whatever happens outside, one of them will always remain behind to guard the scarlet firefly fruits. If anything were to happen, that saber-tooth spirit tiger might choose to destroy the entire tree. Thus, we can't just rely on brute force for this matter. We have to find a way to lure the both of them out simultaneously, Dongxin said. She had spent some time in this valley gathering intelligence for the operation, so she had gained a rough understanding of the habits of the 2 saber-tooth spirit tigers. Lure the both of them out simultaneously? Realizing how tricky this matter was, Zhongxian frowned. That's right. Thus, we prepared the origin heavy water that they are extremely fond of. However, due to our limited resources, we were only able to procure 4 bottles, Dongxin said with a bitter smile. Usually, when freshmen enrolled in the academy, their student factions were able to earn sufficient spirit stones to purchase even several dozen bottles of origin heavy water. However, the freshmen this year had all chosen to join the Shenxian faction, so they had failed to earn anything at all. On top of that, they even had some of the senior students in their factions betraying them for the Shenxian faction. As a result, they'd had to fork out from their own pockets, and altogether, they only had sufficient money to acquire 4 bottles. 4 bottles of origin heavy water? Zhongxian's eyes lit up. If he could acquire just one of those, he would be able to cultivate the 3rd incandescence of his quintuple incandescence golden body. How do you intend to use the origin heavy water? Zhongxian asked. After a moment of hesitation, Dongxin revealed her plan. The saber-tooth spirit tiger is extremely sensitive to the scent of origin heavy water. Our plan is to open a bottle to lure the first saber-tooth spirit tiger out. Once the first one leaves, we will use the same trick to lure the second one out as well. Of course, we will have to ascertain that the scarlet firefly fruits have matured first. Otherwise, our efforts will be futile. Zhongxian shook his head. It is unlikely that your plan will work. Once the scarlet firefly fruits mature, even if the 2 saber-tooth spirit tigers don't consume them directly, they will surely harvest them and escape swiftly. Ultimately, no matter how alluring the origin heavy water is to them, it can't compete with an opportunity to achieve a breakthrough to half-saint. Besides, I think you are underestimating the intelligence of the saber-tooth spirit tigers. They already possess intelligence on par with humans, so it is unlikely that they will fall for such a simple ploy. With only a step away from reaching half-saint, those 2 saber-tooth spirit tiger were more than capable of keeping their instincts in check. It would be difficult to get past them with such a crude plan. What should we do then? Dongxin asked anxiously. The others turned their gazes to Zhongxian as well. I do have a plan in mind, but I will need your origin heavy water, Zhongxian said. Chapter 864. Someone before us. Zhongshe has an idea in mind. Hu Yarou and the others traded glances, and their eyes lit up simultaneously. As valuable as origin heavy water was, its value couldn't match the maturing scarlet firefly fruits. As master teachers, they could tell that their plan was unrefined, but limited by their cultivation and the resources they had at hand, they were unable to find a better plan. If Zhongxian had an idea, that would be for the best. Of course, Zhongxian nodded affirmatively. That is great. Recalling how the young man before them was able to tame over 400 spirit beasts in 2 hours, as well as the master of the Byzantium Aelios beast, the 4 of them couldn't help but tremble in anticipation. Here you go. Dongxin and the others flicked their wrists and took out a jade bottle each. It seemed that they had all agreed on purchasing a bottle each and gathering them together after arriving in the valley. Taking the jade bottles from them, Zhongxian uncorked the lid of one of them, and he immediately felt the rich water attribute energy contained within. He could feel his cells quivering in excitement, seemingly desiring the fluid within the bottle to cultivate the 3rd incandescence. Just wait and see, I will lure those 2 fellows out. However, knowing that this wasn't the time for him to cultivate, Zhongxian stowed the jade bottles into his storage ring. Given how valuable the origin heavy water was, it would be a huge waste to use it to lure the saber-tooth spirit tiger away. In any case, he did have another plan in mind to lure out the spirit beasts that wouldn't require the origin heavy water. In fact, if he wanted to, he could easily sneak in and make it out with the entire tree as his soul. Since that was the case, there was really no need to waste good origin heavy water on this matter. It could be put to better use in his hands. But of course, he would make sure to compensate the four of them properly for the origin heavy water too. A compilation on the insights of achieving a breakthrough to half-saint to guarantee them a successful breakthrough should be sufficient. Considering that they were using the origin heavy water to bet on the possibility of obtaining the scarlet firefly fruit, which only raised the possibility of achieving a breakthrough to half-saint, a compilation that could guarantee them a successful breakthrough was definitely worth more than the price of the origin heavy water. After putting away the origin heavy water, Zhongxian asked, "Right, can you share your full plan with me? I can help you analyze it to determine its feasibility." "Our plan is actually rather simple. After luring those two fellows out, we will trap them in a formation, quickly obtain the scarlet firefly fruits, and leave," Zhongxian said. "Trap them in a formation? If you want to trap a chrysalis realm pinnacle saber-tooth spirit tiger, the formation must at least be grade 6. On top of that, it must be capable of activating swiftly. Do you have such a formation plate on hand?" Zhongxian asked doubtfully. "UN. Just in case an accident occurs, the four of us have prepared a formation plate each, namely a confinement formation, illusory formation, beguilement formation, and slaughter formation." Since they were going to collaborate with one another, there was no need to hide this matter from Zhongxian. Zhongxian shook his head. "It should be possible to trap the saber-tooth spirit tiger with the grade 6 formation plates you have on hand, but it isn't a foolproof measure. You will have to pump your zhunqi into the formation to sustain it, but considering the overwhelming strength of the saber-tooth spirit tigers, you won't be able to hold on for long under their thrashing. It is uncertain if you will be able to buy sufficient time to procure the scarlet firefly fruit and escape before they break out, so the plan doesn't seem to be particularly reliable." The main advantage that a formation plate provided was that even those who didn't understand formations could activate and use it as well. However, it had its fair share of disadvantages compared to typical formations, too. Unless one could create a compound formation of it with a spirit gathering formation, one would have to activate and sustain it using one's zhunqi. The amount of zhunqi a cultivator possessed was limited, so while formation plates might be useful in alleviating dire situations temporarily, their effectiveness was limited in the long term. The saber-tooth spirit tigers possessed extraordinary strength, so it was hard to say whether or not the formation plates could stall them long enough to obtain the scarlet firefly fruits. It was no wonder they eventually chose to find him. With this plan, their probability of success was probably even less than 20%. On the other hand, hearing Zhongxian's words, their faces turned red. They also knew that there was a problem with their plan, but there was no alternative they could think of. After a moment of hesitation, Hu Yarou spoke up with gritted teeth. "Zhongshu, if we obtain these scarlet firefly fruits, we are willing to take only one each, and the rest will go to you." The other three nodded in agreement. They knew that it would have been extremely improbable for them to succeed, so they felt embarrassed to share an equal split of the scarlet firefly fruits with him. In any case, their goal was just to make the breakthrough to half-saint. As long as they could succeed, it mattered not whether they obtained one scarlet firefly fruit or two. Zhongxian shook its head. "Let's obtain them first before talking about that." It was impractical to be talking about the distribution when they hadn't even obtained them yet. Understanding this logic, the others nodded, and the group proceeded forward. "The area where the scarlet firefly fruits are located is just around this bend. Let's proceed carefully," warned Dongxin as she took a look at the surroundings. The others nodded as they advanced with bated breaths. While the saber-tooth spirit tigers would know that there were intruders due to the presence of the scarlet koi flowers, as long as the intruders didn't possess strength beyond them, they were unlikely to be alarmed. As long as they were to conceal themselves well and figure out a perfect opportunity to strike, they would still have a shot at success. Advancing for a little longer, just as they were about to reach the end of the narrow path in the valley, Zhongxian's eyebrows suddenly shot up in alarm. "Something's wrong." Seeing Zhongxian come to an abrupt halt, the others swiftly stopped in their footsteps as well. What's wrong? However, Zhongxian didn't reply to their questions. Instead, he walked over to a nearby boulder and squatted down. A moment later, he gestured them over and said, "Take a look at this." Hu Yarou and the others headed over with doubtful expressions, and behind the boulder, they noticed slight traces of fresh soil that was slightly different from its surroundings. It was barely discernible, they wouldn't have noticed it if they weren't paying close attention, but the fresh soil didn't seem to belong to the valley. This is. The others were slightly perplexed by the sight before them. This valley seems to be suffering from dry weather, as we can tell from the dry soil in the area. However, these bits of soil carry a slight bit of dampness with them. If I am not mistaken, I believe that someone has entered the valley ahead of us. Zhongxian revealed his deduction. He had been keeping a lookout on his surroundings using the eye of insight, and as inconspicuous as the traces of fresh soil were, he was still able to easily find them and determine their origin. Someone has entered the valley ahead of us. On the other hand, hearing Zhongxian's words, the faces of the others immediately warped in shock. The main reason they were so persistent about the scarlet firefly fruits here was because there was no one else aware of their existence. If the news regarding them had spread somehow, it would complicate things. Zhongxian nodded. Judging from the soil, it seems there are 2 of them, and it has been less than 10 minutes since they passed this point. Also, the stronger of the duo seems to be a half-saint realm cultivator. You are able to tell their cultivation just by these soil traces? Everyone was stunned. Was he a fortune teller? It might be possible to gauge the time when the soil was left behind by its dampness, but how in the world did he manage to deduce the strength of those who had entered too? I have been paying close attention to the surroundings, and I didn't notice any such soil traces behind us. In other words, the other party must have flown in and landed here. I can still feel slight traces of his zhenqi in the surroundings, and through that, it is not impossible to deduce his cultivation, Zhongxian replied. At half-saint, a cultivator had already comprehended the ability of basic flight. However, having yet to open the Zhukong acupoint, their flight would be unstable, and zhenqi would leak from their acupoints as well. If the other party had not stopped here, the leaked zhenqi might have been so faint that it would have been nigh impossible to discern anything. However, as the other party had landed here, a trace of his zhenqi lingered in the area, allowing one to deduce his cultivation. Incredible. The crowd couldn't help but be awed. Even though they were master teachers as well, in terms of their meticulousness and analytical ability, they were still far too lacking compared to Zhongxian. Shui Zhenyang's face suddenly turned grim. If a half-saint is here, will the saber-tooth spirit tigers destroy the fruits? If a half-saint was there, the saber-tooth spirit tigers would surely have been alarmed. If the spirit beasts were to destroy the fruits out of desperation, they would have made the trip in vain. Hu Yarou shook her head. I think we should focus our attention on figuring out the identity of those who came earlier than us. If they obtain the fruits before us, it would be no different from them being destroyed to us. There was some truth in her words. If the other party were to obtain the scarlet firefly fruits before them, were they supposed to snatch the fruits from the other party's hands? As master teachers, they had to conduct themselves appropriately. If they were to be found guilty of snatching a treasure from the hands of another, they would be severely punished by the master teacher pavilion. The others nodded in agreement as they continued to advance discreetly. After turning at the end of the meandering path, a vast plot of land suddenly unfolded before them. It was at least several thousand square meters, as if someone had forcefully dug out this space in the midst of the valley. At the end of the path, lying against the cliff face, was a massive cavern. The scarlet firefly fruits were inside it. Through the eye of insight, Zhongxian could see dense spiritual energy congregated within the cavern, puffing out from time to time. There is indeed someone ahead of us. Dongxin frowned. Following her gaze, there were 2 silhouettes hiding behind a boulder outside of the cavern, seemingly fiddling with something in their hands. A half-saint and a chrysalis realm expert. Upon discerning the cultivation of the duo before them, the 4 of them couldn't help but glance at Zhongxian in admiration once more. It was exactly as he had deduced. The clothes that they are wearing, are those master-teacher robes? But why are they different to ours? Shui Zhenyang frowned. It was after Shui Zhenyang's remark that everyone turned their attention to the clothes of the duo. Unlike the normal loose-fitting master-teacher robes, the grey robes they wore seemed to be tighter and more fitting. From their side profile, they could vaguely make out a master-teacher emblem pinned on their chest, but unlike the usual soothing and magnanimous aura it carried, the emblem they donned felt sharp and aggressive. It seemed as if their eyes would be pricked if they were to stare at it a moment longer. After a moment of contemplation, Long Tsungyue said, "Even if their robes are different from ours, I can still sense that they are master teachers from the unique imprint on their emblems. However, it doesn't seem like they are from Hongyuan Empire. I know nearly all of the experts of their caliber in the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy and Master Teacher Pavilion, but neither looks familiar to me." Yuan Shui Zhenyang and the others nodded in agreement as well. As elites of the Master Teacher Academy, they'd had the privilege of meeting many of the top master teachers in Hongyuan Empire. If those two had been from Hongyuan Empire as well, they should have been able to recognize them. Since they couldn't, chances were that they were from a foreign land. In any case, the mountain range they were in was already beyond Hongyuan Empire's territory, so it wasn't surprising to see foreign master teachers in the area. The convention among master teachers regarding the distribution of artifacts is on a first-come first-serve basis. Once someone has obtained the treasure, the others are not to snatch it by force. Even if they really wish to obtain the treasure, they will have to do so via proper means, Dongxin said. In a scenario where many master teachers were going for the same artifact, regardless of means, the first one to obtain it would be considered its owner. Malicious actions such as killing the person in possession of the item to snatch it were strictly forbidden. Otherwise, if master teachers were to wrestle one another to death over artifacts, what right would they have to preach to others? Of course, the side that failed to obtain the artifact could negotiate with the one in possession of the artifact regarding its distribution by offering something in exchange for it or through an official duel. However, if the one in possession of the artifact were to reject all negotiations, there was nothing that could be done. It will be over once they lay their hands on the scarlet firefly fruits, so we have to obtain the fruits before them, Hu Yarou said with a grim expression. A moment later, Hu Yaroiro's eyebrows shot up and she asked doubtfully, "What are they doing?" Ahead of them, the duo seemed to be in no hurry to rush into the cavern either. The stronger of the duo had lit up an incense and was discreetly manipulating his zhenqi to blow the incense toward the cavern. "If I'm not mistaken, that item should be soul shock incense," Dongxin said. "Soul shock incense?" Hu Yarou and the others asked doubtfully. "Yuan. The smoke produced by the incense contains a substance that can beguile a soul with hallucinations. They must be using it to incapacitate the saber-tooth spirit tigers before stealing the scarlet firefly fruit," Dongxin explained. "However, that item doesn't discriminate between friend and foe. If they fill the cavern with the smoke, aren't they worried that they will fall under the effects of the soul shock incense as well?" Chapter 865. Crossing hands. The soul shock incense was crafted using several hundred unique medicinal herbs, and its effects were so potent that it was effective even on chrysalis realm cultivators. However, the soul shock incense didn't discriminate between friend and foe. Even if they could blow the smoke away from them now, they would still be affected by it once they entered the cavern. Every toxin has a counteracting antidote to it. Most likely, they must have concocted a pairing antidote and consumed it beforehand, Zhong Xian replied calmly. There was always an antidote to a poison, no matter how potent it was, needless to say a substance that only induced hallucinations. Yuan. The others nodded in agreement. "What should we do then? Once the smoke fills the cavern, the saber-tooth spirit tigers will surely be knocked out, and they will be free to obtain the fruit," Dongxin exclaimed anxiously. The other party had a half-saint expert, so it would be impossible for them to get to the scarlet firefly fruits faster than the other party once the saber-tooth spirit tigers were knocked out. After a moment of deep thought, Zhong Xian replied, "We will have to be the first to strike then. Since they were unable to outrun or outfight the other party, they would just have to be the first one to make a move. Be the first to strike." The others were perplexed, unsure of what Zhong Xian meant. The other party was right in front of the cavern, and the cavern was currently filled with the smoke of the soul shock incense as well. Even if they were to rush in now, not only would they be unable to obtain the scarlet firefly fruits, they might even succumb to hallucinations as well, putting them in a vulnerable position. Wait for me here. If anything happens, leave the area immediately. Remember, your safety comes first. I will circle the area to see if I can find an opportunity to sneak into the cavern without them noticing, Zhongxian instructed. You want to sneak into the cavern? The cavern was only that big, and the duo was right before the cavern. How could he possibly sneak in without the other party noticing? Don't worry about that, leave it to me. Zhongxian reassured them before diving to the side. In a few moments, he had already disappeared from their sights. After Zhongxian's departure, Dongxin and the others glanced at one another with bewilderment reflected in their eyes, unsure of what to do. A long moment later, Hu Yaoyao sighed deeply and said, "Let's just follow Zhongshi's instructions." Since he has already said those words, he must have an idea in mind. In the current circumstances, there was nothing they could do. Their only option was to follow Zhongxian's commands. Considering the various miracles that the latter had produced before, perhaps he might just be able to exceed their expectations once more and obtain the scarlet firefly fruits ahead of the duo. After getting out of the other's sight, Zhongxian hid in a discreet location before drawing his soul out. Under the present circumstances, the only way for him to sneak into the cavern discreetly was through his soul. As for what he said about circling the area and finding an opportunity, that was only an excuse for him to hide out of view. Floating in the air, Zhongxian hesitated for a moment before whipping out a bottle of origin heavy water. He fed it to his body and drew out several surges of Heaven's Path Zhenqi from his dantian before stowing his body into the myriad ant-hive nest. His physical body had already achieved the mind of void, allowing it to cultivate instinctively without his soul. Since that was the case, it would be a waste not to make full use of the ability to cultivate the third incandescence, especially since it wouldn't interfere in his mission anyway. Holding his storage ring up with his soul energy, Zhongxian's soul traveled silently alongside the cliff face toward the cavern. Standing on guard right before the tree was a massive saber-tooth spirit tiger. It had an impressive body, which was 2 meters tall and 5 meters long, and it carried an oppressive aura that seemed to stifle one's breath. The other saber-tooth spirit tiger was prowling warily around the tree with its gaze frequently turning to the entrance of the cavern. It seemed to have realized that there were enemies camping outside, and nervousness and apprehension were reflected in its eyes. It seemed to be debating whether or not it should simply devour the unripe scarlet firefly fruits and escape swiftly. The smoke of the soul shock incense had yet to reach this part of the cavern, so the 2 large tigers still retained their consciousness. It seems Dongxin's intelligence is spot on. Zhongxian nodded in approval. There were indeed 10 fruits on the tree, and the 2 saber-tooth spirit tigers were at Chrysalis Realm Pinnacle as well. To be able to gather such detailed intelligence, Dongxin must have scouted the cavern as well. While the saber-tooth spirit tigers were extremely wary, it was inevitable that they would lower their guards from time to time, especially while they were tending to their fundamental needs. Furthermore, the fruits were still far from maturity then, so they wouldn't have been as wary as they were now. With Dongxin's Chrysalis Realm Pinnacle cultivation, even if she wasn't a match for the saber-tooth spirit tigers, she was still capable of sneaking in discreetly to scout the area. There are 2 ways I can proceed now. First, I can release the Byzantium Alios beast, kill these 2 spirit beasts, and claim possession of the scarlet firefly fruits. This is the easiest and most direct method, but I will risk exposing my means as a soul oracle and the existence of the myriad ant-hive nest. Second, I can find a way to hasten the maturity of the scarlet firefly fruits, harvest them, and swiftly escape without anyone noticing. If so, I can avoid a confrontation with the 2 master teachers, thus sparing me a great deal of trouble. Zhongxian thought. Naturally, the easiest solution would be to release the Byzantium Alios beast and swiftly get rid of the 2 tigers. However, it would be hard to explain how he had managed to sneak into the cavern without their notice and where the Byzantium Alios beast had come from. The second method it is then. After giving the matter some thought, Zhongxian still felt that the second method would be safer. I will have to knock these 2 fellows out first. Having made up his mind, Zhongxian's soul retreated slightly behind and drew the smoke of the soul shock incense in with his soul energy. The scarlet firefly fruit should only be harvested upon maturity, and in order to hasten the maturity of the scarlet firefly fruit, Zhongxian would have to bring out his physical body to utilize his heaven's path Zhenqi. Thus, he would have to incapacitate the two saber-tooth spirit tigers first. Under the control of his soul, the smoke of the soul shock incense swiftly gathered around the tree. Too focused on the cultivators loitering outside the cavern, the two spirit beasts didn't expect to be poisoned. Unknowingly, they took a few breaths in, and their bodies began shaking uncontrollably. In the blink of an eye, they were already hallucinating. After waiting for a few moments to confirm that the two fellows were incapacitated, Zhongxian rushed forward to the tree, took out his physical body, and returned his soul to it. Flicking his wrist, he took out a gourd of earth vein spirit essence and dripped it on the fruits while pumping his heaven's path Zhenqi into them. The reason Zhongxian dared to go in there without having to worry about being late for the inauguration ceremony, despite Hu Yaoyao saying that she was unsure when the scarlet firefly fruit would mature, was due to this ability of his. He had learned of this method when he had tried to hasten the maturity of the 10-leafed flower back in Yushu's residence previously. Under the influx of the earth vein spirit essence and heaven's path Zhenqi, the light red fruits swiftly deepened in color, and a glow gradually emerged within them. Before long, a refreshing fragrance began to permeate the surroundings. The fruits have matured. Zhongxian's eyes lit up. He swiftly harvested the 10 scarlet firefly fruits and placed them in a jade box before stowing them into his storage ring. After which, he drew his soul out of his body and placed his body into the myriad ant-hive nest before storing the nest in his storage ring as well. After all that was done, he took a glance at the saber-tooth spirit tigers once more and saw that they were still shaking on their feet, plagued by hallucinations. Heaving a sigh of relief, he swiftly picked up his ring and rushed out of the cavern. Shortly after he escaped from the cavern, he saw the two master teachers who had lit the soul shock incense earlier walking over, seemingly trying to check if they had successfully knocked out the saber-tooth spirit tigers. With a slight smile, Zhongxian quickly left the premises with his storage ring. He hurriedly searched for a discreet area with no one around before letting his body out and returning to it. In the time he had spent stealing the scarlet firefly fruits, his physical body had successfully cultivated the third incandescence of the quintuple incandescence golden body. His physical strength had doubled, rising from the original 8 million ding to 16 million ding. If exerted in unison with his soul and Zhenqi cultivation, he would be able to bring out a combined might of 53 million ding, which was comparable to the strength of a half-saint pinnacle cultivator. Half-saint primary stage 40 million ding, intermediate stage 44 million ding, advanced stage 48 million ding, pinnacle 52 million ding. Feeling the overwhelming power coursing through his body, Zhongxian couldn't help but tremble with excitement. For an ethereal treading realm primary stage cultivator to possess strength on par with a half-saint pinnacle cultivator, that would terrify the bejesus out of others. That was a gap that couldn't be justified by just talent, it could only be said to be a miracle. All right, I should return now. Exhaling deeply, Zhongxian stood up and returned to the area where he had last seen Hu Yaoyao and the others. However, just as he was approaching the area, he suddenly felt a violent shockwave rippling in the surroundings. This is bad. Narrowing his eyes in alarm, Zhongxian picked up his pace and rushed over. A few breaths later, he saw several cultivators battling one another intensely in a clearing. Shui Zhenyang, Hu Yaoyao, Dong Xin, and Long Tsungyue were fighting one of the duo they had encountered earlier. They executed powerful attacks with varying styles, but their opponent, despite fighting the four of them simultaneously, didn't seem to be falling in defeat. On the contrary, he easily neutralized their attacks and even cornered the four of them to the point that they had to execute their strongest techniques just to hold their ground. It's the Chrysalis Realm Pinnacle Fellow? Zhongxian took a look at their opponent and frowned. If their opponent had been the half-saint expert, it would be understandable for the four of them to still be in a disadvantageous position despite putting their strength together. However, their opponent was the Chrysalis Realm Pinnacle Master Teacher, possessing cultivation equal to theirs. The four of them were famed geniuses of the Master Teacher Academy, and there were barely any cultivators of the same cultivation realm who could defeat them. Yet, For them to be cornered even in a 4-on-1 battle against a fellow peer, was this really happening? Their opponent was a little, way too powerful. Glancing to the side, Zhong Xian saw the half-saint cultivator leaning a boulder as he gazed at the duel impassively, seemingly unworried that his companion would lose at all. It seemed that the other party had absolute confidence in the strength of his companion. Knowing that Hu Yarou and the others would lose tragically should the duel continue as it was, Zhong Xian stood forward and bellowed, "Stop." Chapter 866, Zhong Xian's Prowess. Zhong Shi. Upon seeing Zhong Xian, the eyes of Hu Yarou and the others immediately lit up. They immediately attempted to retreat from the battle to unite with him, but their opponent harumphed coldly. "Do you think that you can stop this battle just because you want to? Hoo." The opponent brandished the sword in his hand, and a powerful might immediately chased after Hu Yarou and the others, leaving them no choice but to turn around to counterattack. However, their counterattack was still a little late, and the opponent's slash left them with a deep cut on their arms. What swift swordsmanship! Zhong Xian's eyebrows shot up. The opponent's swordsmanship wasn't exceptionally profound, but it made up for its simplicity with speed, preciseness, and exceptional mastery in the comprehension of sword intent. Despite collaborating with one another, Hu Yarou and the others were still unable to withstand its might, and they were pulled back into the battle once more. Seeing the opponent attack Hu Yarou and the others relentlessly, leaving them no opportunity to escape at all, Zhong Xian frowned. "That friend over there, we are all master teachers, so surely we can talk things out. There is no need to resort to a life-and-death duel. You want the duel to stop? Sure, if you think that you can save them, you are free to try. Otherwise, I am afraid none of you will be getting out of here unharmed." The Chrysalis Realm Pinnacle Cultivator fighting Hu Yarou and the others taunted with a smirk. The opponent's voice sounded extremely young, which drew Zhong Xian's gaze to his facial features. Astonishingly, he realized that the opponent seemed to be even younger than Hu Yarou and the others, possibly only in his early 20s. To reach Chrysalis Realm Pinnacle at such a young age and subdue Hu Yarou and the others simultaneously, the opponent's talent was truly fearsome. Turning his gaze to the half-saint realm cultivator as well, Zhong Xian noticed that the other party was only in his mid-20s as well. Since that is the case, pardon me. Seeing that the opponent had no intention of stopping, if the battle were allowed to continue, Hu Yarou and the others would eventually suffer severe injuries. Thus, without any hesitation, Zhong Xian leaped into the battle as well. Ethereal Treading Realm? Sensing Zhong Xian's cultivation, the disdainful sneer emerged on the lips of the half-saint standing by the side, seemingly anticipating that Zhong Xian would make a fool out of himself. "Even 4 Chrysalis Realm Pinnacle cultivators are no match for my companion. What can an ethereal treading realm primary stage like you possibly do? You are merely courting death. I was thinking, how formidable must you be to talk so much by the side? But it turns out that you are only at the ethereal treading realm. Since that's the case, I will have you collapse first." The fighting young man also noticed Zhong Xian's weak cultivation, and the same disdainful sneer surfaced on his face as well. After pushing back Hu Yarou and the others with a powerful slash, he rushed straight toward Zhong Xian with a stab. Even before the sword arrived, the powerful aura it emanated would have already pierced deep into one's body, leaving one shivering uncontrollably. That young man might only have been at Chrysalis Realm Pinnacle, but the might of his sword surpassed even some half-saint experts. It was no wonder Hu Yarou and the others couldn't defeat him even in a 4-to-1 battle. Facing such a powerful stab, Zhong Xian didn't bother to hide at all. Activating his Eye of Insight, he swiftly analyzed the area where the sword would land, and abruptly exhaled deeply. "Hoo-la!" Zhong Xian's chest immediately deflated along with the exhalation. In a battle between experts, the slightest millimeter could make the greatest of difference. The sword was aimed right at his chest, but it seemed that the other party had no intention of killing him with this stab, aiming to only achieve a shallow pierce and stop right before his heart. However, with the deep exhalation Zhong Xian had made, the rampaging force of the advancing sword stopped right before his chest instead. Even the sharpest of sword can't pierce the thinnest of cloth once it loses its momentum. As powerful as the young man's stab was, it had already run out of strength at this point. With a light chuckle, Zhongxian lifted his hand and held the other party's swords lightly between his forefinger and middle finger. Wang. As if a captured snake, the sharp sword wouldn't budge no matter how the young man tried to pull it away. What sharp insight and mental fortitude! The half-saint cultivator by the side narrowed his eyes. This movement might seem simple and lackluster, but it wasn't something that just anyone was capable of pulling off. One's eye of discernment and mental fortitude must reach beyond par. If one's discernment wasn't sufficiently keen and a wrong judgment was made, the sword could end up piercing one's chest instead. On the other hand, if one lacked sufficient mental fortitude, it would be impossible to retain one's composure before a life-and-death situation such as this. Interesting. For an ethereal treading realm cultivator to dare to face the sword of a chrysalis realm pinnacle expert head-on, the other party sure had a lot of guts. However, Wu Shu's sword can't be stopped that easily. He will have to pay a heavy price for it. His companion might possess a weaker cultivation than him, but his mastery of swordsmanship was astonishing. The other party might have managed to catch his companion's sword out of a stroke of luck previously, but the true challenge had yet to come. With his lips curled up, the half-saint cultivator turned his sight to the battlefield calmly, expecting to see how his companion would subdue the young lad. He had thought that Zhongxian would surely be severely injured at the very least, but the latter had actually managed to shatter Wu Shu's sword with a simple flick of his finger. How could the other party possibly wield such fearsome strength? Was the other party really an ethereal treading realm cultivator? They had always prided themselves on being invincible among cultivators of the same cultivation realm, so how could his companion be defeated by someone of a weaker cultivation level than him? Damn it! Wu Shu shook his head in disbelief, unwilling to believe what had just happened. With a frenzied look on his face, he charged at Zhongxian once more. It was impossible for someone who was nearly 2 cultivation realms weaker than him to defeat him so easily. Impossible. On the other hand, seeing that the young man was still unwilling to give up, Zhongxian shook his head with a sigh and raised his fist. Heaven's path fist art. Peng. Before Wu Shu could even process what was going on, he had already been struck by a punch to his chest. He collapsed to the ground, coughing an endless stream of blood. It felt as if his internal organs had shifted under the incredible force, and even after a brief respite, he was still unable to catch his breath. It took him a few more moments before he managed to recover sufficiently to return to his feet. With a face completely warped by rage, Wu Shu glared at Zhongxian, seemingly preparing to make his next move, when the half-saint cultivator by the side abruptly intervened. Enough. Don't you think that you have embarrassed yourself enough? Yes. Wu Shu glared at Zhongxian hesitantly for a moment longer before hesitantly backing down to the side. He took out a pill and swallowed it, and only then did he feel his condition alleviate slightly. Even though he had decided not to make a move, his hostile gaze was still fixated on Zhongxian, seemingly tempted to tear him apart. Ignoring the duo, Zhongxian whipped out a wine gourd and infused his zhenqi inside before passing them over to Hu Yarou and the others to heal their injuries. After that was done, he turned his gaze back to the duo with a deep frown on his face. We are all master teachers here, but you willfully made a move on my companions, and not to mention, you even resorted to such vicious moves. Do the rules of the master-teacher pavilion mean nothing to you? Vicious moves? You haven't seen what truly vicious is yet. Hand over the scarlet firefly fruits, and I can consider letting you off. Otherwise, none of you will be getting out of here unscathed today. Wu Shu roared in response. Hearing those words, the short-tempered Shui Xingyang bellowed furiously, "Scarlet firefly fruits? We have been behind you all this while. How in the world could we possibly have obtained the scarlet firefly fruits ahead of you?" From the start to the end, they had never found an opportunity to approach the cavern. Yet, the duo actually came over to demand the scarlet firefly fruits from them. Was there something wrong with their minds? Even if you wish to accuse us, at least find something less illogical than that. We confirmed earlier that there were scarlet firefly fruits inside the cavern, but they suddenly disappeared when we entered the cavern just a moment ago. On top of that, we noticed traces suggesting that someone had hastened the maturity of the fruits. There are only the few of us in this valley, so who else could it be if not you? Wu Shu snapped. The two saber-tooth spirit tigers had lost their consciousness, and there were no signs to say that they had devoured the fruits ahead of them. From this, they deduced that someone must have beaten them to the scarlet firefly fruits. There weren't too many people in the valley, so the culprit could only be them. If we had obtained the scarlet firefly fruits, we would have already long left the valley. Why would we waste our time loitering around this area and talking to you? You are clearly making up nonsense to extort our wealth. Hu Yarrow Yarrow harumphed. In her opinion, the duo were the ones who had harvested the fruits, and they were only making use of this opportunity to extort them. They were truly a disgrace to all master teachers. Preposterous, Wu Shu was just about to argue with Hu Yarrow Yarrow when the half-saint cultivator beside him abruptly waved his hands and bellowed, "Enough!" Wu Shu immediately fell silent. I am sure that we can agree that the scarlet firefly fruits are very important to all of us here. Like you have said, we are all master teachers. If you have harvested the scarlet firefly fruits, we are willing to officially negotiate the distribution of the fruits with you under the rules of the Master Teacher Pavilion, the half-saint said calmly. How do you intend to negotiate? Zhong Xian asked. Simple. If any of you can withstand 3 blows from me, we will turn around and leave straight away. Otherwise, pardon me, but you won't be leaving until you hand over 5 scarlet firefly fruits today, the half-saint replied. If we win, you get to leave without any compensation, and if we lose, we have to hand you 5 scarlet firefly fruits. Ha ha ha, this is the most hilarious joke I have heard in the longest time. You call this a negotiation? What makes you think that we will agree to such terms? Zhong Xian sneered coldly. Chapter 867, I can use any means at my disposal? Of course, we aren't expecting to take the scarlet firefly fruits from you for free. If we win, we will buy those fruits from you at a price of 50 high-tier spirit stones, the half-saint cultivator said. 50 high-tier spirit stones? Zhong Xian scoffed. If you can fork out 5,000 high-tier spirit stones, I can sell them to you right now. Just the several bottles of origin heavy water and formation plates that Hu Yarrow Yarrow and the others had prepared to obtain the scarlet firefly fruits already exceeded 50 high-tier spirit stones. To offer to buy 5 of them for such a price. Did he really think that they were fools? If you want to buy some of the fruits, sure, we are willing to sell them. 5,000 high-tier spirit stones, no more, no less. You should learn to watch your words. You might possess exceptional talent, but in my eyes, you mean nothing at all. The Master Teacher Pavilion might forbid killing among fellow Master Teachers, but teaching you a lesson. I think I have sufficient authority to do so, the half-saint said coldly as he glanced at Zhong Xian with narrowed eyes. Why? Are you going to resort to threatening me now that you don't have enough money? Zhong Xian burst into laughter. This is not a threat, I am merely stating facts. In the world that we live in, the only thing that truly counts is strength. The half-saint harumphed as an aura reminiscent of a sharp sword abruptly burst out of him, forcing all flora and fauna in the area to lower themselves subserviently. Feeling that aura, the faces of Hu Yarrow Yarrow and the others paled in astonishment. They had met plenty of half-saints in their time, but the aura of the other party felt like a guillotine above their heads, threatening to decapitate them should they show the slightest resistance. This fearsome aura was something that they had never felt before, even from a nascent saint expert. Seemingly unaffected by the other party's overwhelming aura, Zhong Xian asked with a wry smile on his lips, in other words, you are saying that justice lies in the hands of the strong? That's right. The Master Teacher Pavilion might have its own set of rules, but before true strength, those rules are meaningless. I recommend you learn your place and hand over the scarlet firefly fruits obediently. Perhaps, we might still be able to settle this matter peacefully. Otherwise, I don't mind challenging you all to a master-teacher confrontation. By then, not only will you not receive any spirit stones at all, you will have to call someone to carry you back, the half-saint cultivator sneered coldly as he placed his hands behind his back, glancing at Zhong Xian with an aura of superiority. Snatching was forbidden among master teachers, but challenging one another to duels was allowed. Furthermore, considering that they were in a rural area, there would be no eyewitnesses to say anything if the pair did do something to them. Fair enough. Since you have already said that much, there is nothing else I can do. Seeing that the other party was insistent on settling the matter with force, Zhongxian shook his head with a sigh and commanded, "Byzantium lad, get him." Who? Before anyone could process what was going on, the Byzantium Alios beast abruptly flew over from further down the valley and appeared before the half-saint. In order to not reveal his possession of the myriad ant hive nest, Zhongxian had secretly slipped the nest a distance away before having the Byzantium Alios beast emerge from it. What? The half-saint cultivator did not expect to see a Saint Toad and Saint Beast appear before him abruptly. He immediately leaped in the air to flee, but the next instant, a massive palm smacked him back to the ground. Peng! Due to the immense force, the half-saint cultivator tumbled 8 rounds before knocking heavily into the cliff face, and a large mouthful of blood spewed from his lips. In the first place, the Byzantium Alios beast was a saint beast capable of rivaling cultivators who possessed a cultivation beyond it, not to mention, its cultivation was far higher than his at that. He might possess exceptional fighting prowess, but there was no way he could be a match for the other party. Damn it! Knowing that it was impossible for him to flee, the half-saint cultivator's face turned so dark that it could bleed ink. Flicking his wrist, a sword appeared in his hands, and with a swift motion, he charged forward to strike the Byzantium Alios beast. Seeing the other party's movements, Zhongxian nodded in commendation. Not bad. It was no wonder the other party was so arrogant. He did have the strength to back up his words. Just this single move in itself could easily overwhelm an average nascent saint. Even Zhongxian didn't have the confidence to overcome this move head-on. However, it was a pity that his opponent was the Byzantium Alios beast. As one of the elders of the Master Teacher Academy, the Byzantium Alios beast had fought innumerable battles. How could it possibly be afraid of a mere half-saint? With a roar, its massive palm plucked an enormous tree from the side and flung it toward the half-saint cultivator. Peng! When the sword was still 8 meters away from reaching the Byzantium Alios beast, the wielder of the sword was already struck on his head, and he was smacked flying toward the cliff face once more. In the first place, this battle served no purpose at all. There was an insurmountable gap between the two of them, so there could only be one outcome. You! Pushing himself away from Cliff, the half-saint cultivator popped a pill into his mouth to alleviate his injuries. Gritting his teeth, he spat, "We are all fellow master teachers. Don't you think that it is underhanded for you to have a saint beast elder interfere in our duel?" In his view, the Byzantium Alios beast was probably an elder accompanying them on this trip to ensure their safety. It should have been a fight among peers, but you had an elder fight in your stead. Don't you think that it is embarrassing? Elder! Zhongxian burst into laughter. The Byzantium Alios beast is my tamed beast. Why do you think that he is an elder? Surely a beast tamer can use his own tamed beast in a duel, right? Your tamed beast! The half-saint was stunned. He had seen many beast tamers before, but even the most capable 7-star beast tamer he had seen could only tame a saint beast 1 realm stronger than him. Yet, this lad, despite being only at the ethereal treading realm, actually managed to tame a spiritual perception realm saint beast. How could this be possible? Ethereal treading, chrysalis, half-saint, nascent saint, void pursuit, spiritual perception. That was 5 whole realms. That's right, Zhongxian replied nonchalantly as he beckoned with his hand. The Byzantium Alios beast immediately walked over and nudged intimately Zhongxian with its head. This. The half-saint was rendered speechless. If he had known that the other party had such a powerful tamed beast, he would have never provoked him. Beast tamers always fought with their tamed beast. While the other party's tamed beast might be irrationally powerful, that could only be credited to his astounding capability as a beast tamer. There were no bones anyone could pick from this. How was this duel supposed to proceed? Even if he were to grit his teeth and fight on, he would only be furthering his suffering. What's wrong? Didn't you say that you want to challenge me to a duel? Sure, I accept your challenge. Beast taming is one of my supporting occupations, so my tamed beast can be considered part of my own strength as well. You shouldn't have any problem with that, right? Feel free to make your 3 moves. I will also have Byzantium lad make 3 moves as well. There is no need to stand on ceremony, Zhongxian said as he politely gestured for the other party to make his moves. Weren't you arrogant just now, thinking that we are powerless before you? Sure, two can play that game. If you can withstand 3 blows from my Byzantium lad, I will admit defeat willingly. The half-saint cultivator nearly spurted a mouthful of blood. If the Saint 2 Dan Byzantium Alios beast were to fight him seriously, he would be destroyed in an instant. 3 moves. He wouldn't even survive the first one. It's true that beast tamers can bring their tamed beasts into battle, but since we are master teachers, don't you think that you are diverging too much from your origins by relying so much on your tamed beast? With a reddened face, the half-saint cultivator challenged, I dare you to have a battle with me without the assistance of your tamed beast. You can use any other means at your disposal, and as long as you can defeat me, we will turn around and leave immediately. I can use any other means at my disposal? Zhongxian asked the half-saint cultivator with a peculiar smile on his lips. That's right. The half-saint cultivator nodded vehemently. As long as the other party didn't make use of the Byzantium Alios beast's strength, given his prowess as a half-saint, he could achieve victory easily. He had gained a rough gauge of the other party's strength from his battle with Wu Shu earlier, and he was confident that he could defeat the other party in a normal duel. Don't you think that those words sound familiar? I recall that someone said those words just a moment ago. However, if you are willing to compensate me 100 high-tier spirit stones if you lose, I don't mind having another duel with you, Zhongxian said. Naturally, Zhongxian wouldn't accept a duel if he had nothing to gain from it. 100 high-tier spirit stones? Fine. But if you lose, you have to give me 5 scarlet firefly fruit. Seeing Zhongxian agree to the duel, the half-saint cultivator's eyes lit up in excitement. Sensing the other party's excitement even before the duel had started, Zhongxian shook his head and said, I haven't lost yet, you know. Humph, we will see soon enough. The half-saint cultivator flicked his sword, and a crisp reverberation sounded from his sword. Come. Wait a moment. Allow me to confirm once more. As long as Byzantium lad doesn't make a move, I can use any other means at my disposal. Zhongxian confirmed once again. The half-saint cultivator nodded. That's right. All right then, sounds fine to me, Zhongxian replied. Good. With a cold sneer, the half-saint cultivator stood upright, and in that moment, it felt as if he had become one with his sword. Despite the arrogance of the half-saint cultivator, his comprehension of swordsmanship wasn't beneath Zhongxian's at all, achieving sword heart realm. Otherwise, his swordsmanship wouldn't harness might that could destroy even a nascent saint expert. Zhongshe, be careful, Hu Yarou said worriedly. Even though the half-saint cultivator had been struck twice by senior Byzantium Alios, due to the latter going easy on him, his injuries weren't too severe, and they had mostly recovered with the pill he had swallowed earlier. In his current state, he should be able to exert his full strength. Hu Yarou wasn't too sure how powerful Zhongxian was, but the disparity in their cultivation realms was simply too huge. No matter how formidable Zhongxian might be, defeating a half-saint while at the ethereal treading realm seemed to be nigh impossible. This worry was also shared by Xue Zhenyang and the others. It was not that they didn't have faith in Zhongxian's strength, but that his opponent was simply too powerful. Be it the other party's aura or sword intent, those weren't what ordinary cultivators could withstand. Seeing everyone's expressions, Zhongxian chuckled leisurely. Don't worry. He said it himself that I can resort to any means as long as Byzantium lad doesn't interfere in the duel. With a flick of his wrist, he said, Ding ding, you're up. Teach that fellow a lesson. Who? In the next instant, a massive weapon cauldron appeared before everyone else. It seemed to harness searing flames within it, causing in the surroundings to become exceptionally torrid. This is the guardian saint artifact of our academy, the Golden Origin Cauldron. Recognizing the other party, Hu Yarou nearly collapsed to the ground. It was well known among the student populace that the Master Teacher Academy had a powerful guardian saint artifact that even senior Byzantium Alios wasn't a match for. Even though Hu Yarou had never met the guardian saint beast before, she had seen a painting of it in some books. She had thought that it was already formidable that Zhongshe had succeeded in taming senior Byzantium Alios, but he had actually managed to tame the guardian saint artifact as well. Beside her, Shui Zhenyang and Long Tsungyue also saw the world darken before them, and they nearly keeled over. To tame even the guardian saint artifact. It was no wonder he was forced to become the principal. There were no viable candidates other than him. Otherwise, if he were to take both senior Byzantium Alios and the guardian saint artifact away with him, it would be no different from the Master Teacher Academy's treasury being emptied out. Hu Yarou and the others were only overwhelmed by shock, but at the moment that the Golden Origin Cauldron appeared, the half-saint cultivator saw 10,000 divine beasts stampeding through his mind. His mouth widened to the point where one could stuff an egg in, but he was still unable to alleviate the suffocating sensation he felt in his chest. You tamed a saint beast. Fine, I will accept that. Perhaps, you might just be lucky, encountering an injured saint beast and treating him, thus becoming its benefactor. But to tame a saint-tier artifact as well, not to mention one as powerful as that cauldron, just how in the world did you do it? A pity it was that the half-saint cultivator wasn't even granted the time to brood over his misery. The Golden Origin Cauldron, upon hearing that there was someone it could beat up, leaped up in excitement and declared, "Don't worry, Master. I will fulfill the mission you have asked of me perfectly. Watch how I, the Golden Origin Cauldron, reduce him to cinders within moments." After which, the half-saint cultivator saw the large figure before him turn into a blur, and he instinctively raised his sword in defense. Catcher! The sword in his hands broke into smithereens, but before he could even process that, his body was already whizzing through the air before crashing right into the cliff face once more, leaving a huge-shaped depression behind him. More than a dozen of his ribs had shattered, and fresh blood spurted uncontrollably from his mouth. Chapter 868, Breakthrough, Chrysalis Realm. Brother Lu. Wu Shu hurriedly rushed forward to pull his companion out of the wall and fed him a recovery pill. Why you? After consuming the recovery pill and resting for a moment, the half-saint Brother Lu finally regained consciousness. Pointing a shaking finger at Zhongxian, he felt as if he was going to burst into tears. It is one thing for an ethereal treading realm lad like you to possess a spiritual perception realm saint beast as a tamed beast, but to have a saint-tier artifact on top of that. Tell me the truth, are you actually Kong Shi's illegitimate son? Otherwise, how can you have so many good items in your possession? What's wrong? You were the one who told me that I can resort to any means at my disposal as long as Byzantium lad doesn't interfere in the battle. You were the one who set the rules, and I simply followed them. Zhongxian shrugged nonchalantly. Pu. A strong feeling of frustration welled up in Brother Lu's chest, and he spurted yet another mouthful of blood. What was this? He had thought that the other party could only have a Byzantium Alios beast as his trump card. As long as he restricted that, he would be able to pummel the other party as he pleased. How could he have known that the other party would have a cauldron on top of that? Screw this. The person who I want to fight is you, not your saint-tier artifact. You might not have broken any rules, but how the hell am I supposed to fight with a saint-tier artifact? There is no way I can win, right? Gritting his teeth, Brother Lu exclaimed, what I mean is a fight without relying on any artifact or saint beast, a proper duel between two cultivators using their own strength. Fearing that the other party would whip out some kind of powerful item next, he emphasized using their own strength. I see. So, you want to have a proper duel as martial artists? Zhongxian asked. That's right. Do you dare accept my challenge? Brother Lu taunted. He had always been a proud person, but he had ended up being humiliated more than he had ever been in his life today. If he didn't vent it out today, it would become a permanent trauma that would hunt him for life. While it was unbecoming for a half-saint expert like him to challenge an ethereal treading realm cultivator, in view of the many means the other party possessed, not even he could say that he had absolute confidence in achieving victory. Sure, but the stakes will be doubled. Zhongxian replied calmly. A duel? As long as there is sufficient money involved, I am open to negotiations. Fine by me. A glint flashed across Brother Lu's eyes as he nodded in agreement. Remember, you have already lost once, so you owe me 100 high-tier spirit stones, Zhongxian reminded. Brother Lu harumphed. You don't need to worry about that, I won't stoop so low as to renege on my promise. But of course, if you lose, I hope that you can fulfill your end of the bet as well. All right then. I won't take advantage of you. I will give you 2 hours to recuperate from your injuries before we begin the duel, lest you refuse to admit defeat later on. Zhong Xian waved his hands casually. You. It should have been a good thing that the other party was giving him some time to recuperate, but for some reason, Brother Lu felt as if the other party was mocking him, and he felt another warm surge gushing up his throat once more. It took some time before he managed to recover, and after taking a deep breath, he nodded. Fine. It was through countless battles that he had managed to attain his current strength. He knew that it was precisely in crucial periods like this that he shouldn't allow his emotions to cloud his rationality. 2 hours might not be sufficient for him to make a full recovery, but he should be able to exert around 95% of his full strength by then. And to him, that was more than enough. Brother Lu turned to Wu Shu and said, Wu Shu, give me 2 of your miniature restorative pills. Yes. Wu Shu nodded. The miniature restorative pill was an extremely valuable grade 6 pill, and he was usually reluctant to use one even when he was injured. However, knowing that Brother Lu had gotten injured for him, he passed them over without any hesitation. This grade 6 pill was known to be effective on even the injuries of Saint Realm experts. Even if the 2 pills couldn't guarantee a complete recovery, they should improve his condition significantly. Swallowing the miniature restorative pill, Brother Lu immediately felt the medicinal energy coursing through his body, and his pale complexion swiftly regained its color. The Golden Origin Cauldron turned to Zhong Xian and advised, Master, given that this fellow was able to survive my attack, his strength is extraordinary. It would be best not to make light of him. By the side, the Byzantium Alios beast also nodded in agreement. The 2 of them had exchanged blows with Brother Lu, and even though they were able to subdue the other party easily, they could feel that the fellow's strength far surpassed that of ordinary half-saint cultivators. Even though their master wasn't a weakling either, he was still some way off from matching the other party. I know. Zhong Xian nodded. Through the eye of insight and library of Heaven's Path, he knew that the other party possessed exceptional prowess, which he couldn't match in his current state. However, the outcome of a battle couldn't be determined by just mere stats. The decisions one chose to make in the midst of a battle played a vital role, too. Even though Zhong Xian felt that he wouldn't lose, he still thought that he should make some preparations just in case. This was also why he had proposed taking a 2-hour break before the duel. The enemy needed time to recuperate, but he needed time to prepare his hand as well. Zhong Xian turned to Hu Yarou and the others and asked, Do you have any ethereal treading realm cultivation technique manuals? I need as many of them as possible. The best way for him to stand against that Brother Lu was to raise his cultivation and narrow the gap between them. 2 hours might not be much to anyone else, but to him, as long as he compiled the corresponding Heaven's Path Divine Art manuals, he would be able to raise his cultivation swiftly. We do have some. Hu Yarou nodded, and the 4 of them began taking out all of the ethereal treading realm cultivation technique manuals they had. As the leaders of their respective factions, they tended to keep quite a handful of cultivation technique manuals of lower cultivation realms in their storage rings so that they could refer to them whenever they were guiding their subordinates in their cultivation. For ethereal treading realm, they had around several hundred books each. Zhong Xian swiftly scanned them with his gaze, collecting them into his library of Heaven's Path. By compiling all of them together, he successfully formed the ethereal treading realm Heaven's Path Divine Art. Zhong Xian turned to them and asked once more, What about Chrysalis Realm Cultivation Technique Manuals? I only have 20 Chrysalis Realm Cultivation Technique Manuals with me at the moment. 12 here. Dong Xin is more meticulous, so she might have more with her. I do have a few more, but I only have around 40 of them in total. Soon, gathering the 4's Chrysalis Realm Cultivation Technique Manuals together, there was a total of around 100 books or so. After collecting them all into the library of Heaven's Path and compiling them, the result was just as Zhong Xian had expected. There were still too many flaws to form a complete Heaven's Path Divine Art. Nevertheless, the portion regarding the breakthrough to Chrysalis Realm was still perfected. In other words, he had the Heaven's Path Divine Art manuals to cultivate from Ethereal Treading Realm Primary Stage all the way to Chrysalis Realm Primary Stage. Guard me, I need to cultivate now. Zhong Xian said. Even though he had failed to compile the complete Chrysalis Realm Heaven's Path divine art, he was still rather satisfied with the result. Yes. The others nodded, but they couldn't help but trade perplexed glances with one another. To cultivate right before the duel. Isn't that just desperately grasping at straws? But despite the doubts in their mind, they still made sure to guard him earnestly. They hid him behind them while directing their gazes intently at Wu Shu and Brother Lu, fearing that they might attempt to do something in the meantime. However, even though the two of them had resorted to some underhanded means out of their desperation to obtain the scarlet firefly fruits, they still had their pride as martial artists. As such, even though they had noticed that Zhong Xian was cultivating, they didn't try to disrupt him in any way. They chose to focus their efforts on recuperating from their injuries instead, so that they would be in their top condition for the duel 2 hours later. Seeing that they weren't going to pull anything, Hu Yarou heaved a sigh of relief. However, with her attention freed, doubts about the impending duel began sprouting in her mind. Unnerved, she turned to Senior Byzantium Alios to ask her about the chances of Zhongshu achieving victory, hoping to ease her worries, when she suddenly heard Dong Xin gasping in shock. "What's wrong?" The others immediately turned to her with doubtful gazes. With a body stiffened with shock, Dong Xin pointed behind her. "Look at Zhongshu. Zhongshu." Hu Yarou and the others turned around to take a look, and what they saw left them dumbstruck. Is it just my imagination, or has Zhongshu's cultivation reached ethereal treading realm intermediate stage? Xue Zhenyang uttered with quivering lips. They had gotten a clear glimpse of Zhong Xian's cultivation when he made a move against Wu Shu earlier, ethereal treading realm primary stage. Yet, in just a short moment after he started cultivating, why did it feel as if the latter had achieved a breakthrough? It's not your imagination. He has indeed reached ethereal treading realm intermediate stage. Hu Yarou nodded affirmatively. Most likely, Zhongshu must have been stuck at ethereal treading realm primary stage for quite a long while and was already on the verge of a breakthrough. Advancing a single stage abruptly wasn't much to be surprised about. To use an analogy, if one was already standing before the goal of a marathon, all it would take was one final push to successfully achieve the breakthrough. There was no need to make a fuss over it. That does seem to be the case. No wonder Zhongshu agreed to have a duel with the other party so readily. It seems he was already on the verge of a breakthrough. However, it doesn't seem like advancing a single stage will make much of a difference to the outcome. "Ah!" Xue Zhenyang remarked while he nodded, but then he suddenly exclaimed in the midst of his words. "What is with you again?" Seeing Xue Zhenyang make a big fuss out of everything, Long Tsungyue was rendered speechless. No matter what, they were the cream of the crop in the Master Teacher Academy, competent and knowledgeable. Why did it seem that after meeting Zhongshu, they had all become countryside bumpkins who were ignorant of the world? Why do I feel like Zhongshu has reached ethereal treading realm advanced stage? Could my eyes be playing tricks on me? Xue Zhenyang's face paled as he rubbed his eyes forcefully. He was certain that Zhongshu had just reached ethereal treading realm intermediate stage a moment ago, so how could he be at the advanced stage right now? Even the greatest genius in the world couldn't advance that fast. Advanced stage? You must be joking. All of us clearly saw it just now, and he is definitely at the intermediate stage. Long Tsungyue chuckled softly, and just as he was going to make a joke about how Xue Zhenyang's eyes had been failing him recently, he suddenly caught a glimpse of Zhong Xian, and his eyes widened in shock. Holy moly! He really is at advanced stage. Long Tsungyue exclaimed with tears threatening to spill from his eyes. On the other hand, watching the frenzied state that the other two were in, Hu Yarou and Dong Xin hurriedly turned their gazes over, and their eyes couldn't help but widen in astonishment as well. It appeared that Zhongshu was truly at ethereal treading realm advanced stage. Could they have made a mistake earlier? But was it really possible for all four of them to make such an elementary mistake simultaneously? However, no matter how they looked at it, the other party was indeed at ethereal treading realm advanced stage. There was no mistake about that. Before the few of them could recover from their shock, Dong Xin suddenly exclaimed with a hoarse voice, "Wait a moment, he isn't at ethereal treading realm advanced stage but ethereal treading realm pinnacle. Pinnacle?" The group couldn't help but feel the world spinning around them. With a tearful expression, Hu Yarrow gasped, "Why does it seem like he is attempting a breakthrough to Chrysalis Realm?" "No, he is indeed attempting a breakthrough." "Wait, that isn't right, he has already reached Chrysalis Realm." The group couldn't help but be dumbstruck once again. The young man behind them was already a Chrysalis Realm primary stage expert at this very moment. To advance from Ethereal Treading Realm primary stage to Chrysalis Realm primary stage, one entire realm, in less than an hour. Even though they had witnessed the sight with their very own eyes, they still couldn't help but think that they were in a dream. Feeling so shocked that her mind was going to explode, Hu Yarrow asked, "Dong Xin, how long did it take you to advance from Ethereal Treading Realm primary stage to Chrysalis Realm primary stage?" 2 years and 4 months. With this record, I was already considered one of the fastest cultivators in the Master Teacher Academy. Dong Xin replied hoarsely. When she'd achieved the feat back then, she had felt a huge surge of confidence, which had made her feel as if she was unrivaled in the world. But looking at the young man before her, she realized that her record didn't even come close to being associated with the word fast. It felt as if even a turtle would be faster than her. It was no wonder that, back at the Elder Hall, that fellow had said that his rate of cultivation had slowed due to him being busy with various matters. Back then, she had thought that he was just bragging, but after witnessing this sight, she realized that not only was he not bragging, he was even being incredibly humble. At this moment, a random, passing thought raced through her mind. If she were to run to the 10 great master teachers to tell them that Zhongshe was actually extremely humble and low profile, would they think that she was exaggerating and throw her out? Chapter 869. Still a Human? Having compiled the relevant Heaven's Path Divine Art Manual, Zhongxian began cultivating with the Earth Vein Spirit Essence without any hesitation. Due to the easier absorbability of the Earth Vein Spirit Essence, his rate of cultivation was much faster than if he had cultivated using a Spirit Stone instead, so he was able to achieve breakthroughs faster than normal. However, even though he had managed to achieve breakthroughs swiftly, the amount of spiritual energy he needed had, in fact, increased exponentially instead. He had procured a huge pool of Earth Vein Spirit Essence from the Cloud Mist Ridge, but in just this hour of cultivation, he had already depleted nearly a third of it. The higher my cultivation is, the harsher the requirement on the spiritual energy I have to absorb. Even though the Earth Vein Spirit Essence is rich in spiritual energy, its purity is still lacking. Zhongxian shook his head. The Earth Vein Spirit Essence was rich in spiritual energy and had a high absorbability, thus making it an invaluable treasure. However, its purity was inferior to high-tier spirit stones. It was sufficient for the usage of saint beasts and other cultivators, but to Zhongxian, who cultivated the Heaven's Path Divine Art, it was still lacking. Only 1/10 of the Earth Vein Spirit Essence was suitable for his absorption, and the remaining 9/10 ended up being wasted in the process. It seems like I shouldn't cultivate using the Earth Vein Spirit Essence anymore. If it comes to it, I should just sell it for high-tier spirit stones. Zhongxian thought. Since the effectiveness of the Earth Vein Spirit Essence for him was declining, he would only be wasting it if he were to continue using it. Rather than to waste such a valuable resource, it would be wiser for him to sell it instead. It might be useless to him, but it was still an invaluable treasure to others. Otherwise, the saint beasts of the Cloud Mist Ridge wouldn't have been guarding it so desperately back then. Forget it, I will think about it when I return to Hongyuan City. Putting the matter to the back of his mind, Zhongxian turned his attention to his newfound strength. Advancing from Ethereal Treading Realm primary stage to Chrysalis Realm primary stage, the strength that he could draw from his Zhenqi cultivation had increased from 17 million ding to 29 million ding. With just that, he was already on par with a Chrysalis Realm advanced stage cultivator. Chrysalis Realm primary stage 25 million ding, intermediate stage 28 million ding, advanced stage 31 million ding, pinnacle 34 million ding. If he were to factor in the 20 million ding from his soul cultivation and 16 million ding from his physical body, that would total up to an incredible might of 65 million ding, which was on par with a nascent saint intermediate stage cultivator. Nascent saint primary stage 60 million ding, intermediate stage 65 million ding, advanced stage 70 million ding, pinnacle 75 million ding. In other words, he wielded strength equivalent to a cultivator 2 realms stronger than he. With this, that fellow shouldn't be a match for me anymore. Zhong Xian chuckled confidently. That brother Lu was clearly no pushover, but compared to Zhong Xian, the other party was still slightly lacking. Zhong Xian meditated on the spot to reinforce his cultivation, bringing his aura to its strongest state, before opening his eyes and gazing at the duo opposite to him. Brother Lu seemed to have mostly healed from his wounds as well, and his aura felt sharper and more pressurizing than before. Most likely, he had used some kind of formidable secret art to bring himself back to his peak state for the duel. That fellow sure won't be easy to deal with, Zhong Xian remarked internally. Under normal circumstances, given how much weaker he was than the other party should not view him as much of an opponent. Yet, the other party focused his attention fully on conditioning himself to his peak state, not underestimating him in the least. It was truly rare to see a cultivator not becoming complacent before an opponent weaker than them. Often, geniuses were defeated not due to being overpowered by the strong but due to carelessness against the weak. A long moment later, Brother Lu exhaled deeply and abruptly stood up. I am done recuperating. Are you done yet? His complexion was still slightly pale, but he had managed to condition his state to be significantly stronger than he was before. Of course. Zhong Xian chuckled as he stood up as well. Let's begin then. Draw your weapon. With a flick of his wrist, Brother Lu took out another sword from his storage ring. As a sword practitioner, it was normal for him to have more than a single sword in his possession. All right. Zhong Xian flicked his wrist as well, and a sword appeared in his grasp. Glacier Rain Sword. That is, a half-saint weapon. As soon as the sword materialized, a huge gust of frigid air swept into the surroundings, as if heralding the arrival of the king. Brother Lu's lips immediately began twitching. To think that the fellow's sword would be a half-saint artifact as well. Does your family operate a weapons shop? Otherwise, how could you have so many good items in your possession? With a reddened face, Brother Lu asked hesitantly, Ahum. Your sword is a little too sharp, so can you change to another one? The weapon in his grasp was only at spirit pinnacle, which was far weaker the other party's half-saint sword. Just the sharpness of the sword would boost the other party's fighting prowess by at least 50%. On the other hand, he would have to avoid a direct clash with the other party's sword as far as he could, which meant that his movements would be severely restricted. Change to another one? Zhong Xian frowned in irritation. When I sent Byzantium Lad against you, you said that I shouldn't rely too much on my capabilities as a beast tamer. When I sent the Golden Origin Cauldron against you, you said that I shouldn't rely too much on my saint-tier artifacts. Now, you are even picking on my sword. At this rate, are you going to start picking on my clothes next? But as displeased as Zhong Xian was, he eventually nodded. Forget it. Since you were injured previously, I will just acquiesce to your request. He scanned his surroundings for a moment before reaching forward to grab a certain object. With a smile, he said, I will fight with you using this then. A blade of foxtail grass? Hu Yarrow and the others staggered weakly. The object that Zhong Xian had just picked was indeed a narrow blade of foxtail grass. He was going to fight with that. But his opponent was a half-saint, and an extraordinarily powerful one at that. Even if you have achieved a breakthrough, is it really fine for you to do that? Noticing their worry, Zhong Xian chuckled lightly as he placed the foxtail grass in between his forefinger and middle finger. Pumping a surge of zhenqi into it, the bent foxtail grass immediately became taut, as if a real sword. The essence of swordsmanship lies not in the sword. To a true sword master, even a blade of grass or pebble from the side of the street can serve as a sword. This might be foxtail grass, but if used well, it can display astonishing power as well. As he said those words, Zhong Xian gently slit the foxtail grass through the thick tree trunk that the Byzantium Alios beast had tossed to the ground earlier, and it was immediately sliced into 2 halves. What pure zhenqi! Brother Lu narrowed his eyes in astonishment. Even though the other party was wielding a blade of foxtail grass, its true edge lay in his zhenqi. But to be able to make one's zhenqi as sharp as a sword's edge, just how pure must his zhenqi be? At the very least, he knew that he was incapable of doing the same. Let's start. Knowing that the other party would still be a formidable opponent even when wielding a blade of foxtail grass as a weapon, Brother Lu let out a battle cry and charged forward, taking the initiative. Wang. His sword, imbued with sword qi, sliced through the air with incredible momentum. From the very start, he was already using his full strength. He knew better than to underestimate his opponent due to his lower cultivation or his choice of weapon. Come. With a light chuckle, Zhong Xian raised his foxtail grass and stabbed it toward the other party's armpit like a rapier. All sword practitioners shared a common weakness. When they swung their swords, the area around the armpit would be open, even if just for the briefest of moments. This was a weakness commonly exploited against sword practitioners. But naturally, most sword experts would have already trained themselves to guard that area perfectly. And Brother Lu was no exception to the rule. Voila! Even though Brother Lu was perplexed as to why the other party would use such a basic move to deal with him, he dared not to make light of the other party's counterattack. With a powerful flick of his wrist, he pulled his sword back to seal the advancement of the other party's foxtail grass, and at the same time, he sent a powerful blast of sword qi straight toward Zhong Xian's glabella. In a single move, he managed to defend himself while launching a counterattack simultaneously, successfully turning the tides of the battle in his favor. Not bad, your reflexes are good. However, that's not enough, Zhong Xian said with a chuckle. In the next instant, his foxtail grass abruptly bent like a flexible rope, completely bypassing the other party's sword. What? Caught off guard by the unexpected twist, Brother Lu's face paled in shock. With the bending of the other party's foxtail grass, not only was his defense rendered ineffective, more importantly, the tip of the foxtail grass was heading straight for a major acupoint on his chest. If he failed to dodge this, he would be severely wounded. After all, he had witnessed how formidable the might of the other party's foxtail grass was when the tree trunk was easily split in two with a light flick earlier. Not daring to take any risks, Brother Lu hurriedly retreated a few steps back. Hee. On the other hand, Zhong Xian seemed to have expected Brother Lu to respond in such a way. He leaped forward, closing the distance between them in an instant. At the same time, the foxtail grass in his hand straightened as it lunged forward, this time directed at Brother Lu's throat. Despite the abrupt change in movements, the maneuver was completed extremely smoothly and elegantly, making it peculiarly pleasing to the eye. While others were appreciating the gracefulness of the movement, Brother Lu felt as if the Grim Reaper was pulling him down instead. If he were to stop at this instant, his throat would be impaled. Thus, with a pale face, he continued retreating hurriedly. On the other hand, Zhong Xian continued to pursue him relentlessly, and this time, his foxtail grass was aimed for the other party's shanzhong acupoint, located at the center of the chest. Helpless, Brother Lu could only continue retreating. The foxtail grass moved around flexibly in Zhong Xian's hands, aiming for the gaps in the half-saint cultivator's swordsmanship precisely with every move. Frightened, Brother Lu didn't dare retaliate and could only retreat endlessly. From the start of the battle to this point, the sword had never come into contact with the foxtail grass at all. How powerful! Hu Yarou, Dong Xin, and the others glanced at one another, and they couldn't help but gulp. They had gotten a glimpse of Brother Lu's strength earlier from the aura he exuded, and even an average nascent saint wouldn't be a match for him. But it was only after witnessing Zhong Shi's prowess that they realized what true power was. Using a blade of foxtail grass to face a spirit pinnacle weapon directly, but not only was the foxtail grass not severed, it was even able to force the other party back continuously. Just how deep of an understanding of swordsmanship did one need to possess to do this? It seems that Brother Lu's defeat is sealed, Xue Zhenyang muttered with clenched fists. Before the battle, he had thought that Zhong Xian still wouldn't be a match for the other party even with a half-saint sword in hand. But with this, he realized that he got it all wrong. It was Brother Lu who was never a match for Zhong Xian, and the difference between them was as clear as day. He couldn't help but feel thankful that he had acknowledged Zheng Yang as his teacher then, thus becoming Zhong Xian's grandstudent. He could hardly imagine what would have happened to him if he had really faced Zhong Xian. Too scary. Peng. While the others were overwhelmed with shock, Brother Lu continued retreating under Zhong Xian's relentless assault, and finally, he found his back pressed against the cliff face, left with nowhere to escape anymore. Who? Zhong Xian's foxtail grass also stopped right before the other party's heart. I have lost. With a face as pale as a sheet of paper, Brother Lu hated to admit it, but he knew that it was his utter defeat. Pardon me. With a polite smile, Zhong Xian flicked his wrist, and the foxtail grass finally broke apart into 8 pieces, scattering on the floor. Wu Shu, who had taken the entire battle into sight, muttered with quivering lips, 132 moves, but Brother Lu didn't even manage to nick the other party. Instead, he retreated a total of 77 steps and was eventually forced to cast aside his sword and admit defeat. Is this still the feat of a human? Chapter 870, Selling the Spirit Essence as Brother Lu's companion, Wu Shu knew how powerful his swordsmanship was. Just slightly short of becoming a 100-man commander, Brother Lu's fighting prowess far surpassed that of his peers. 132 moves from such a powerful expert, and yet, not a single one had managed to nick the other party's clothes or even the weapon at that. Instead, he had been forced back 77 steps before being eventually cornered. Just how powerful was the other party to be able to accomplish this feat? Thinking about, it was laughable how confident they had been in their strength to have challenged the other party to a duel. They had simply humiliated themselves. Brother Lu. Wu Shu hurriedly rushed over, only to see the latter's ashen face, seemingly having suffered a heavy shock. A moment later, Brother Lu sighed in resignation and waved his hands weakly. Hand him 300 high-tier spirit stones. 100 high-tier spirit stones had been at stake for the first duel, and the stakes had been doubled for the second. All in all, he owed the other party 300 high-tier spirit stones. Yes. Wu Shu gritted his teeth before wrapping a pile of high-tier spirit stones with his zhenqi and handing them over. There were 300 of them, no more, no less. I will be accepting them then. Upon seeing the spirit stones, Zhong Xian's eyes lit up, and he quickly stowed them in his storage ring. Even though the other party had agreed to the bet, he hadn't really expected the other party to pay him. After all, 300 high-tier spirit stones wasn't a small sum. It would be difficult for even a figure of school head Mo's standing to take out so much money on the spur of the moment. Yet, the other party had handed him the sum so easily. Could it be that these two are not only strong but are actually tycoons as well? If that is the case, I should really start thinking about how I could knock some more spirit stones out of them. Stroking his lower jaws, Zhong Xian fell into deep thought. Recovering from the shock of his defeat, Brother Lu clasped his fist and bowed. My name is Lu Cheng, and since I have lost, I shall not disturb you any further. However, I hope to learn of your name in hopes of challenging you once more in the future. A loss was a loss, he could only admit it. Not to mention, there was still a Byzantium Alios beast and a weapon cauldron glaring at him in hostility by the side. I am Zhong Xian. Zhong Xian nodded. You need not think of it that way, it was just a spar between peers. If I am not mistaken, the reason you are so desperate to obtain the scarlet firefly fruit is for Wu Shu over here to make a breakthrough to half-saint. Indeed. Lu Cheng nodded. The main reason cultivators sought the scarlet firefly fruit was for the increased chances of achieving a breakthrough to half-saint. Since Lu Cheng was already a half-saint, the only reason for him to go through the effort of challenging them was for his close companion. Actually, I have taken a look at Wu Shu's condition when I was battling him earlier. The reason he was unable to achieve a breakthrough is not due to his lack of cultivation but… At this point, Zhong Xian paused for a moment. But… Wu Shu asked anxiously. He had been trapped at Chrysalis Realm for too long. Most of his fellow peers had already overcome this bottleneck, racing ahead of him, so he couldn't help but be plagued with anxiety. It wasn't easy for him to learn about the existence of the scarlet firefly fruit in this valley, and he viewed it as his only chance. That was also the reason he had lost his composure and attacked Hu Yaro and the others when he realized that someone had gotten to the fruits ahead of him. If the man before him could help him achieve a breakthrough, it wouldn't matter anymore whether he obtained the scarlet firefly fruit or not. I believe that the reason you are unable to push for a breakthrough is due to your lack of zhenqi, Zhong Xian said. Lack of zhenqi? Lu Cheng and Wu Shu frowned. Due to the special training they underwent, as well as the cultivation techniques and battle techniques they cultivated, their quantity and quality of zhenqi were far above those of ordinary master teachers. Yet, the young man before them had said that Wu Shu suffered from a lack of zhenqi. Had it not been for the astounding prowess that the other party had shown them, they would have surely thought that he was spouting nonsense. Indeed. Your foundation might be far stronger than an ordinary cultivator, but that also means that the bottleneck you face is far more difficult than the others too. To use an analogy, others might require just a pail of zhenqi to achieve a breakthrough, but what you need is an entire lake, Zhong Xian said. This. Wu Shu knew that the other party was right. He possessed extraordinary strength among his peers, but the hurdle he had to face with each breakthrough was higher as well. This wasn't much trouble in his earlier cultivation, but Half-Saint happened to be an exceptionally difficult hurdle to overcome. This is indeed a common problem that practitioners of our school suffer from. Lu Cheng sighed deeply. Zhongshe, is there any way to resolve this problem? To possess strength superior to one's peers, one would have to reinforce one's cultivation over and over again, making it sturdier and stronger than the others. However, the more reinforced one's cultivation was, the harder it was to achieve a breakthrough. This was similar to building a castle. To build a sturdier castle, one would have to build a stronger supporting structure. However, that would also mean that one would have to devote more resources and time for that. This was the problem Wu Shu was facing at the moment. Due to their strict training, their zhenqi was condensed to be far purer than others, granting them nigh invincible prowess among their peers. However, the bottlenecks they faced were also more difficult to overcome in comparison. Zhong Xian hesitated for a moment before replying. I do have a solution for that, but it will be quite troublesome. You do? Lu Cheng had only asked this question casually, not hoping for a positive answer. However, hearing that Zhong Xian really had a solution, his eyes immediately lit up, and he quickly shot his companion a meaningful gaze. Grasping the intention behind Lu Cheng's gaze, Wu Shu hurriedly suppressed his agitation and clasped his fist. As long as Zhong Shi can help me achieve a breakthrough, I am willing to pay any price. For the young man before him to possess such formidable strength at such a young age, he must have come from a powerful background, so he might just know of some means that could help him successfully achieve a breakthrough. The solution is actually really simple. Since you are unable to gather sufficient zhenqi to achieve a breakthrough, you can easily make up for that by increasing the rate you absorb external spiritual energy at to make up for the deficiency, Zhong Xian said. Increase the rate I absorb external spiritual energy at? Hearing Zhong Xian's solution, Wu Shu shook his head bitterly. I have used quite a number of high-tier spirit stones to push for my breakthrough, but I have still been unable to build up sufficient momentum to overcome the half-saint bottleneck. For a person who could whip out 300 high-tier spirit stones at a whim, Wu Shu was definitely not a person who lacked spirit stones. Since he couldn't achieve a breakthrough even with sufficient spirit stones at hand, what else could he do to increase the rate he absorbed spiritual energy at? High-tier spirit stones do indeed help to make up for the deficiency, but their effectiveness is limited due to the long duration required to process the spiritual energy contained within them into zhenqi. Zhong Xian shook his head. In a sense, high-tier spirit stones were like beef. They were effective in staving off hunger, but it wasn't easy to digest them. You're right, but what else can I use if not spirit stones? Wu Shu asked. The reason the spiritual energy within spirit stones is harder to process is due to the solid form the spiritual energy is in. If you were to use spirit essence instead, the rate you could absorb spiritual energy at and convert it into zhenqi would be at least 3 times faster, and that should be sufficient for you to achieve a breakthrough to half-saint. Zhong Xian said. If spirit stones were beef, spirit essence was porridge, easily digestible. Lu Cheng pondered for a moment before frowning. Spirit essence. Do you mean earth vein spirit essence? There were many forms of spirit essence, but the one that was most effective for half-saints was the earth vein spirit essence. The rest would be less effective than high-tier spirit stones. Zhong Xian nodded. That's right. This spirit essence is formed through the accumulation of the spiritual energy contained in the earth veins. Not only is the spiritual energy pure, it is also easily absorbed and converted into zhenqi. If Wu Shu absorbs it, He should be able to gather sufficient zhenqi within a short period of time to overcome his bottleneck. But the earth vein spirit essence is only found in grounds rich in spiritual energy, and those lands are often occupied by dominant powers, so it is even harder to procure it than scarlet firefly fruits. Where are we supposed to find any? Wu Shu said with a bitter smile. Everyone knew that the earth vein spirit essence was good stuff, but obtaining it was easier said than done. Even if he knew it could help him achieve a breakthrough, he had to find a way to obtain it first. Out of a stroke of luck, I managed to obtain a bit of it. However, I was planning to use it to overcome my half-saint bottleneck. Zhongxian said hesitantly. You have earth vein spirit essence with you? Wu Shu's eyes immediately lit up in excitement. Can you sell it to me? I am willing to buy it using high-tier spirit stones. A conflicted expression surfaced on Zhongxian's face. You also know how difficult it is to obtain earth vein spirit essence, and I don't have too much of it either. I'm afraid that I can't sell it to you. After a moment of thought, Wu Shu gritted his teeth and said, Brother Zhong, I am willing to buy it at 2 times the market price. He had to reach half-saint as soon as possible or else he would risk being eliminated. This was a rare opportunity, and he couldn't miss it, no matter the price he had to pay. 2 times? Zhongxian pondered for a long moment before reluctantly nodding in agreement. All right, seeing that you need it so much, as a fellow master teacher, I will make an exception and sell it to you. After which, he flicked his wrist and took out a massive gourd containing around 7 liters of spirit essence. This is all of the earth vein spirit essence that I have collected thus far. I will give it to you then. Zhongxian waved his hands. Wu Shu hurriedly took the gourd and uncapped the cork, and he immediately saw that it was filled to the brim with earth vein spirit essence. The spiritual energy that gushed out of the opening left his cells feeling energized and refreshed. Thank you, Zhongshi. Seeing that the other party was willing to give all of the earth vein spirit essence he had gathered to him, Wu Shu immediately clasped his fist in agitation and thanked him. After which, he went to Lu Cheng and pulled some stuff together before stowing them away in a storage ring. As we left our place in a hurry, we didn't bring too many spirit stones with us. We know the high-tier spirit stones we have won't be enough to make up for the value of the earth vein spirit essence, so we placed some of the valuables we have accumulated over the years in as well. I hope that Zhongshi can accept it, Wu Shu said as he presented the storage ring over. Even though they knew that the young man before them probably didn't lack money, considering that he had a Saint Realm tamed beast and artifact, it would still be improper for them to take something from the other party for free, not to mention that they had agreed on paying double the price earlier. Taking the ring, Zhongxian swept through the contents and saw over 200 high-tier spirit stones, a handful of grade 6 pills, and a bunch of valuable medicinal herbs. If it was in Hongyuan City, this gourd of earth vein spirit essence would probably only have been worth 50 high-tier spirit stones at most. Yet, the other party had given him so much money in return. It could be said that he had made a huge killing this time around. It was not that the other party was foolish, but that the value of an item was determined by the person's perceived necessity of it. Ordinary cultivators could achieve breakthroughs with high-tier spirit stones just fine, so they didn't require the earth vein spirit essence. As a result, its perceived value would be lower to them. Rest well and condition your body to its peak state. With the earth vein spirit essence, you should be able to push for a breakthrough in a single try, Zhongxian said after putting away the storage ring. Yes. Wu Shu nodded. He had suffered a punch from Zhongxian earlier, and even up to this point, he hadn't fully recovered from it yet. To maximize his chances of reaching half-saint, he should only attempt to break through once he was in his peak state. Thank you, Zhongshi. The both of us will take our leave now. Having obtained what they wanted, the duo clasped their fists, turned around, and left. In just a few moments, they had already disappeared from sight. With the departure of the duo, Hu Yaro and the others finally heaved a sigh of relief. Zhongshi, thank you for saving our lives. Before, they had thought that Zhongxian was only terrifying in his supporting occupations. However, with this experience, they learned that his talent for his supporting occupations was nothing compared to his fighting prowess. Chapter 871. Breakthroughs. If I am not mistaken, the both of them are combat masters, right? Exhaling deeply, the tension left Zhongxian's body, and the exhaustion accumulated over that whole period finally set in. Even though he seemed to have won the battle against Lu Cheng easily, he'd had to concentrate deeply as he couldn't afford to make the slightest error. Thus, even though the battle had only lasted for a few minutes, it had sapped Zhongxian's energy dry. Zhongxian nodded in agreement. To possess such fighting prowess at such a young age, and considering the different master-teacher robes that they have, they should indeed be combat masters. She had read a fair number of books, and she knew how fearsome combat masters were. She hadn't really thought much into it before, but with Zhongxian raising the topic, it suddenly dawned on her. Those two might just really be combat masters. Otherwise, given that most master teachers cultivated a variety of supporting occupations, rarely would they compete with one another directly in a physical duel. Combat masters. The others also glanced at one another before nodding in agreement. Indeed. Only the legendary combat masters, who boasted the greatest fighting prowess among the master teachers, could wield such strength. That would explain why a fellow Chrysalis realm cultivator could subdue the four of them so easily. Wait. If Zhongshi can defeat a combat master that easily, doesn't that mean that he is qualified to become a combat master as well? Hu Yarou exclaimed in astonishment. Easily? Zhongxian shook his head with a bitter smile. He went easy on me, or else it is questionable whether I would have been able to defeat him or not. It might seem as if he had won with ease in the eyes of others, but he knew that wasn't the case. Went easy on you. The others were perplexed. You used a blade of foxtail grass while the other party used a spirit pinnacle weapon. On top of that, the other party was unable to even land a single blow on you, so how could he have possibly gone easy on you? Zhongxian shook his head. If I had wielded a spirit pinnacle weapon just like him, it is hard to tell which of us would have emerged triumphant. That Lu Cheng is a proud person. He didn't want to take advantage of the disparity in our weapons, so he curbed his own swordsmanship. On top of that, I intentionally sliced the tree trunk in two before the battle to create a vivid impression of the prowess of the weapon in his mind. Those were what caused him to retreat continuously. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for me to win against him. It might have seemed like an ordinary fight, but before the duel began, the other party had already fallen for Zhongxian's mind games. I see. It was at this instant that realization struck them. The foxtail grass was an unimpressive weapon, but in a single move, Zhongxian had sliced the tree trunk in two, instilling fear into the minds of those who had seen the sight. Lu Cheng was probably the same as well, which led to his subconscious unwillingness to face the foxtail grass head-on. As a result, he had found himself unable to take back the initiative and turn the tides of the battle, thus eventually resulting in his loss. Forget it, it's already over. Here are the scarlet firefly fruits. Condition yourselves well before consuming them. Try to achieve a breakthrough before we return to the academy. Zhongxian flicked his wrist and passed the fruits over. Zhongshi really managed to obtain the fruits. How could they be in your hands? None of them could believe it. They had been watching the cavern intently the whole time, and they had only seen Lu Cheng and Wu Shu entering it. But if Zhongxian had never entered the cavern, how could the scarlet firefly fruits be in his hands? I found another entrance behind the valley and sneaked in from there, Zhongxian replied casually. Naturally, he couldn't talk about his means as a soul oracle. In any case, the items were already in his hands, so the others probably wouldn't be bothered to check on his story either. Incredible. Nevertheless, the others were still impressed. To stumble upon another entrance, it had indeed been the correct decision to invite him over. Here is some earth vein spirit essence, I will give a gourd to each of you. After recuperating, try your best to make a breakthrough to half-saint. Flicking his wrist, Zhongxian took out 4 gourds of earth vein spirit essence and passed them over. These 4 gourds were significantly smaller than the one given to Wu Shu earlier, but it was still worth quite a sum, considering that it was filled with earth vein spirit essence. At the very least, it was definitely worth more than the origin heavy water that they had bought earlier. This. Thank you, Zhongshi. After seeing Zhongxian sell a gourd earlier, They knew that the gourd they had just received was at least worth 50 high-tier spirit stones. To give it to them just like that. How could they ever return the favor? With reddened eyes, they mustered their determination, knowing that they had to successfully make a breakthrough so as to not let down Zhongxian's expectations. Gugu. With the Byzantium Alios beast and golden origin cauldron guarding them by the side, they need not worry about anyone disturbing them here. Thus, sitting cross-legged on the ground, they began to cultivate. 6 hours later, once they had managed to reach their peak condition, they devoured a scarlet firefly fruit each. As expected of the divine medicine that could raise the chances of a breakthrough to half-saint, as soon they consumed it, they immediately felt their psyche growing stronger. Hu Yarou, under Zhongxian's tutelage, was the first one to achieve a breakthrough. The second person to succeed was Dongxin. After the events at the Elder Hall, her mind had grown much more resilient than before. This state of mind would help her achieve greater heights in her cultivation in the future. Following her was Xue Zhenyang. After listening to Wang Ying and the others' teachings on the basics of cultivation, he had managed to reinforce his cultivation further. Even though he was the third one to achieve a breakthrough, his cultivation was considerably more stable than the other two. However, the last one, Long Tsungyue, wasn't as lucky. After failing 4 times consecutively, he felt a sense of fatigue creeping up on him. Knowing that it was impossible for him to succeed that day, he could only sigh in disappointment and stop there. Initially, there hadn't been much of a difference between the 4 of them. However, 3 of them had succeeded in achieving a breakthrough, and he was the only one to have failed. It wasn't too difficult to imagine his current emotions. The 3 of them are Zhongshi's apprentice, grand student, and great-grand student, so they have received his guidance. On the other hand, due to my overthinking of matters and my pride, I ended up being the furthest away from him. Long Tsungyue shook his head bitterly. In one way or another, the other 3 were related to Zhongshi, so they had received his guidance. But he, due to his excessive worries, had chosen to stay out of Zhongshi's way, and the outcome was him eventually lagging behind the others. If he had known this was the case, regardless of whether he would have become Zhongshi's great-great-grand student or anything else, he would have tried to strike up a connection with the latter somehow. Seeing through Long Tsungyue's thoughts, Zhongxian offered a word of advice. What you are lacking is not strength but confidence. Due to your indecisive character, you are unable to rid yourself of your hesitation and charge forward, which has led to your inability to build up sufficient momentum to achieve a breakthrough to half-saint. If one were to ask whether he had played a part in the successful breakthrough of the other 3, the answer would be yes. The points that he listed in his guidance were often direct and spot-on. If one were to cultivate as he had advised, it would indeed be much easier to achieve a breakthrough. However, making a breakthrough to half-saint wasn't just a problem of strength. One's mind also played a huge part as well. Hu Yarou had a willful and decisive personality, allowing her to make prompt decisions and commit to them. Dongxin's mind had been tempered to be more resilient after the setback she had suffered back in the Elder Hall. Xue Zhenyang had a straightforward personality, which allowed him to charge forward without any hesitation. On the other hand, Long Tsungyue was an indecisive worrywart, which made it difficult for him to put his mind entirely into something. It was such a personality that made it difficult for him to succeed. Upon hearing Zhongxian's words, Long Tsungyue suddenly felt enlightened. Zhongshi's teaching is right. Gathering his remaining strength, he sat down and began cultivating, embracing the determination to lose his life if he were to fail. Hong long long. He drove his zhengqi and rammed it furiously into his spiritual sea. A long moment later, he finally felt the invisible ceiling that had been limiting him loosening before abruptly falling apart. Half-saint, reached. By the side, the Byzantium Alios beast and the golden origin cauldron gasped in awe. Incredible. Their master might be young, but he had a deep insight into cultivation and the human psyche. His analyses were often spot-on, directed at the very root of a problem. More importantly, he never discriminated in his guidance. Be it to an ally or a rival, he would offer them his pointers unreservedly. Such magnanimity was rare even among master teachers. Having reached half-saint, Long Tsungyue shed the haughty attitude he once had and bowed deeply to Zhongxian, thanking him earnestly from the bottom of his heart. Thank you, Zhongshe. All right, let's return. Having achieved their goal here, there was no longer any need to remain there. Thus, he stepped onto the back of the Byzantium Alios beast to return to Hongyuan City. Shortly after Lu Cheng and Wu Shu left the valley, they suddenly halted. Brother Lu, why didn't you use your full strength against Zhongshe earlier? Wu Shu had been overwhelmed by the outcome of the battle earlier, but after giving the matter some thought on the way, he couldn't help but feel that something was amiss. He knew very well how powerful Brother Lu was, and there were many powerful moves that he hadn't executed in the duel before he fell in defeat. It was clear that the latter had gone easy on Zhongshe earlier. I didn't use my full strength. Lu Cheng shook his head, and the next moment, his body abruptly faltered weakly, and he spurted a mouthful of blood. Brother Lu. Not expecting Brother Lu's injuries to be so severe, Wu Shu hurriedly helped him to a nearby boulder to rest before feeding him another pill. Seeing the other party's complexion alleviate, he heaved a sigh of relief before asking, Brother Lu, this. After recovering slightly from his injuries, Brother Lu shook his head and said, there were indeed many powerful moves that I didn't execute in the duel, but it isn't that I was unwilling to use them, I couldn't use them at all. You couldn't use them? UN. Even though it might seem as if he was underestimating me by wielding a blade of foxtail grass against me, in truth, every single move he made was aimed perfectly at my opening, leaving me incapable of driving my zhenqi properly to execute my most powerful moves at all, Brother Lu said with a bitter smile. The duel might have already ended, but just at the thought of how he had been cornered by the other party's astounding eye of discernment, he couldn't help but shudder. He had tried multiple times to execute his strongest sword art, but he had been stopped by the other party's foxtail grass before he could even gather the momentum for it. It was just like how a river impeded every now and then couldn't possibly build up the momentum to form a devastating flood. You were unable to drive your zhenqi properly? Wu Shu was taken aback. That's right. What's fearsome about Zhongshe isn't just his overwhelming strength that allowed him to challenge even those stronger than him, but his terrifyingly discerning eyes. It was as if he had studied every single one of my moves in advance, seeing through their flaws and intercepting them the moment I executed them. In truth, from the very first move, I already knew that I had lost. The remaining 100 moves could only be considered the other party's attempt to spare my dignity. Brother Lu shook his head. How can that be? Wu Shu could hardly believe what he was hearing. He knew how powerful his companion was. To lose in a single strike, that was impossible. Furthermore, he had been watching the battle all along, and he didn't notice any hint of Zhongshe going easy on Brother Lu at all. You don't believe me? All right, I will tell you the truth then. In truth, the injury from the Byzantium Alios beast and the cauldron was more severe than I thought. Even though I had 2 hours to recuperate, I wasn't able to fully recover from my injuries. You should be well aware of this, too, Brother Lu explained. Yuan Wu Shu nodded. He had been beside Brother Lu while he was recuperating, so he had a clear view of the extent of the latter's injuries. Thus, I made use of a secret art to suppress my injuries temporarily for the duel. Coming from the same lineage, you should be well aware of what the secret art is, Brother Lu said. Are you referring to the Hu Po recuperation art left behind by Elder Hu Po? Wu Shu asked. Chapter 872, The Body Saint Tree is Dying. Indeed, it's the Hu Po recuperation art. Lu Cheng nodded. Do you know its effects? According to what I know, this secret art doesn't really treat one's injuries. Instead, it aims to trigger the potential of one's body, suppressing one's injuries so as to draw one's fighting prowess to the peak temporarily. This is an emergency maneuver that we combat masters only use under desperate circumstances on the battlefield, Wu Shu replied. Just as Zhongxian had guessed, they were combat masters. As the warriors of the Master-Teacher Pavilion, it was inevitable that they would have to face deadly battles frequently. On the battlefield, losing the ability to fight meant that one was just moments away from death. As such, an elder of the Combat Master Hall, Hu Po, created such a secret art aimed not to heal one's injuries, but to trigger the potential harnessed within the body to grant one the ability to disregard one's injuries and continue fighting. This secret art had managed to save many combat masters from desperate circumstances. Eager to obtain the scarlet firefly fruit earlier, he had ended up using this secret art as well. You're right. Then, do you know the flaw of this secret art? Lu Cheng asked. Wu Shu nodded. The flaw is, as soon as the effects end, one's injuries will worsen. That's right, one's injuries will worsen, and there is a chance that one's cultivation might plummet as well. Lu Cheng said grimly. Zhongsha seemed to know the condition I was in, so he went easy on me from the very first move, and he chose to avoid the places where I was injured previously. Otherwise, I wouldn't have survived 3 moves, let alone 100. This. Wu Shu still found the matter a little inconceivable, thinking that Brother Lu was just overthinking it. You don't believe me? Lu Cheng shook his head. The Hu Po recuperation art suppresses one's injuries by forcing it into a few acupoints. For me, it is the Hongmen and Zhonghui acupoints. If the other party had struck either of these 2 points, I would have suffered severe backlash from my injuries. Wu Shu nodded in agreement. The essence of the secret art lay in manipulating one's zhenqi to seal one's injuries, and the Mingmen of these seals would be located on certain acupoints, depending on the cultivator themselves. Take a look at this. With a bitter smile, Lu Cheng pointed to his clothes. Wu Shu hurriedly took a look, and his eyes immediately narrowed in astonishment. On the area of the clothes corresponding to where Brother Lu's Hongmen and Zhonghui acupoints were located, there were small holes reminiscent of a thin needle. It would have been hard to notice them if one didn't take a closer look. These were left by him? Wu Shu's voice quavered in fear as he spoke. Indeed. From the very first move, he had already noticed my weakness and swept his foxtail grass at those 2 points. Back then, I hadn't realized it yet, thinking that he might just not have sufficient power to complete the attack. However, the next moment, in order to avoid hurting me, he forcefully diverted his attack to my Shanzhong acupoint on my chest. As Lu Cheng spoke, a hint of deference surfaced in his eyes. In truth, if it had been a life-and-death duel, he could have killed me in the very first blow. However, he chose to go easy on me. It was just that I wasn't aware of it then. This. Wu Shu's face paled as it dawned on him what kind of figure he had just crossed earlier. To be able to go easy on his opponent in such an intense battle, was he still human? That was way too fearsome. Even I can hardly gauge the true prowess of Zhongsha. He is truly like an unfathomable enigma. By no means should we ever make an enemy out of him again, Lu Cheng said grimly. Yes. Wu Shu nodded. Since even Brother Lu wasn't a match for Zhongsha, there was no way he would dare to provoke the other party once more. All right, you should hurry up and recuperate from your wounds, then you can attempt to break through to Half-Saint. Once you succeed, you will be able to follow us to the 4 great academies to participate in the selection of new members and accomplish that mission. Otherwise, it will be an extremely long time before you get another chance. Lu Cheng said. Don't worry, Brother Lu. I will surely succeed this time around, Wu Shu said with great determination. On the journey back, Hu Yarou and the others spent most of their time reinforcing their half-saint cultivation, and Zhongxian also used this time to reinforce his chrysalis realm cultivation as well. It was a silent half-day journey back to the Hongyuan city. From their departure to their return, they had only taken slightly more than a day. When the sun started rising from the horizon once more, Hongyuan city was already in sight. A moment later, as Zhongxian glanced downward, he was completely stunned. Is that my manor? What had been rubble when he last saw it had transformed into an exquisite manor that didn't pale in comparison even with the royal palace. On top of that, he could vaguely feel a handful of grade 6 formations that not only gathered spiritual energy in the area but wielded astounding offensive and defensive capabilities as well. What has happened? Zhongxian was unable to understand what had happened during his absence. School head Zhao and the others had said that they would send someone to repair his manor for him, but did they really have to make it so extravagant? Outsiders might just think that this was the royal palace itself. Let's head down to take a look. After bidding Hu Yarou and the others farewell, Zhongxian had the Byzantium Alios beast descend to the courtyard of the manor. As soon as they landed, Sun Qiong immediately rushed up to greet him. What happened? Zhongxian asked in bewilderment. It's the Hongyuan royal family. I tried to stop them, but they insisted on fixing the manor. In the end, I could only watch helplessly as they made this, Sun Qiong said indignantly. In truth, he was also completely dumbfounded by the happenings as well. He could still understand it if the Master Teacher Academy had dispatched some men to fix their manor, but for the royal palace to get involved as well, and to go such great lengths at that. Just what were they up to? The royal palace? Zhongxian blinked blankly. He had been kicked out of the royal palace by the emperor himself 2 nights ago. Why would the other party offer to fix his manor all of the sudden? That's right. Not only so, Emperor Shen Yuqing has also visited 3 times in your absence, requesting to meet you. Sun Qiong said. He wants to meet me? Zhongxian's bewilderment deepened. Were all emperors as unpredictable as that? It was as if they suffered from severe mood swings. But just as Zhongxian was confused by the situation before him, one of the manor servants abruptly rushed in to report that Emperor Yu Shenqing had turned up once again. Invite him in. Zhongxian waved his hands. Even though he had no idea what the other party was up to, it happened that he needed the other party's body saint tree. This was a good opportunity to ask about it. Yes. Sun Qiong headed out. A moment later, Zhongxian met Emperor Yu Shenqing in the main hall. The latter clasped his fist upon meeting him and greeted, Zhongshe. Zhongxian gestured for him to take a seat before asking, Your Majesty, I am thankful that you sent your men to fix my manor, but may I know the reason behind it? We had some misunderstanding the other night, so I hope that we can reconcile our differences through this, Yu Shenqing quickly replied. Misunderstanding? Zhongxian shook his head. Don't worry about it, it's really nothing much. He hadn't really taken the matter that night to heart. After all, he was also at fault for destroying the other party's main hall and ruining the banquet. Seeing that there wasn't any hint of unhappiness on the other party's face, Yu Shenqing heaved a sigh of relief. I'm glad to see that Zhongshe isn't angry about it. He had been worrying over this matter for the last 2 days, fearing that he had offended the other party, but it seemed like the other party hadn't taken the matter to heart. But that was no wonder as well. A person who could create and gift such a formidable set of cultivation techniques on a whim was likely to be a magnanimous person, unbothered by such trifling matters in the world. After chatting for a moment longer, Zhongxian raised his request. I heard that the royal family has a body saint tree. If it isn't too much, may I borrow it for something? Body saint tree? A conflicted expression surfaced on Yu Shenqing's face. It isn't convenient. Zhongxian frowned. Since he had promised to save Wei Ruyan, he would keep his word. However, if Yu Shenqing were to refuse to lend him the body tree, there would be nothing he could do either. It isn't that. With a shake of his head, Yu Shenqing sighed deeply. To be honest with Zhongshe, our body saint tree, for some unknown reason, started to wither some time ago. The situation has worsened particularly in the recent 2 years. I have tried all kinds of means, but I have been unable to reverse its declining condition. I fear that in its current state, it isn't too far from death anymore. Wither? Zhongxian was taken aback. That's right. I have invited over 100 herbologists over the past 2 years, but none of them were able to resolve its illness, Yu Shenqing replied despondently. The condition of the body saint tree was a huge secret of the royal family, so he had been guarding it tightly all along. However, since Zhongshe had asked about it, he could only reply honestly. Can you take me over to take a look? Zhongxian asked after a moment of thought. Zhongshe wants to take a look. Yu Shenqing asked in astonishment. Indeed. I do know a thing or two about herbology too, so I might just be able to help you on this matter, Zhongxian explained. He had once solved a problem for a herbologist back in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, so he wasn't unfamiliar with the occupation. Hearing those words, Yu Shenqing's eyes lit up, and he nearly leaped up in excitement. Zhongshe is knowledgeable in herbology as well. That's great. His ears were already on the verge of growing calluses from hearing about the incredible deeds that Zhongshe had accomplished. After 2 years of effort, he already didn't harbor much hope for the recovery of the saint body tree. However, if Zhongshe were to make a move, there might still be a chance for it to happen. Without any hesitation, he immediately brought Zhongshe on board the saint beast he had arrived on and headed back to the royal palace. Upon landing in the royal palace, Yu Shenqing led the way, and after twisting and turning about numerous roads, they finally arrived at a residence. The body saint tree is right inside, Yu Shenqing said as he gestured toward the building. Here. Zhong Xian frowned. He had never been to this residence before, but he couldn't help but notice that there were no formations set up in the area. Considering how valuable the body saint tree was it really fine to leave it lying around without any protection? Noticing Zhong Xian's doubts, Yu Shenqing answered, the body saint tree is only useful for those who practice soul cultivation techniques, so, perhaps in the whole of Hongyuan Empire, it only has value to our Yu clan. Others wouldn't benefit from it. Besides, having reached Saint Realm, it already possesses its own sentience, and it detests being surrounded by formations, so. I see. Zhong Xian nodded. Formidable saint herbs, just like saint tier artifacts, possessed sentience. It was harder to absorb spiritual energy from the surroundings if they were surrounded by formations, so they loathed it. While speaking, the duo entered the residence, and a few elders within immediately walked over and greeted respectfully, Your Majesty. These elders were all Saint Realm experts, and they were probably stationed there to take care of the body saint tree. Zhongshe, this is the body saint tree. Zhong Xian turned his gaze over and saw a majestic tree in the middle of the courtyard. It had an extremely thick trunk, and it towered at a height of around 12 meters tall. However, the leaves on its branches were shriveled and sparse, and traces of white had surfaced on the tree trunk as well. It didn't seem to be in a good condition. Indeed, the body saint tree is nearing death. Zhong Xian frowned deeply. It was spring, the season when everything came to life and vitality permeated the air, but the massive tree was showing clear signs of decline. There was no doubt that it was extremely ill. Had it not been for the royal family pumping in endless resources to sustain its life, it might have already died. Unable to determine its condition from a distance away, Zhong Xian asked, Can I take a closer look? Of course, Fr. Yu Shenqing nodded, but before he could finish his words, one of the elders stepped forward and said, Your Majesty, it is not advisable for anyone to approach the body saint tree now. Chapter 873 Burnett 1 Elder Zhao, this is Zhongshe. He possesses a deep understanding of herbology, so I invited him to treat the body saint tree as well. Yu Shenqing quickly introduced. These elders were herbologists who he had gone to great lengths to invite here. If not for them, the body saint tree might have long died. Treat the body saint tree? A young brat like him? Your Majesty, I think you should proceed warily, lest yet another scammer makes things difficult for us once more. Elder Zhao took a glance at Zhong Xian and frowned in displeasure. Elder Zhao, Zhongshe is different from those before. He is a man of great capability, Yu Shenqing said awkwardly. Different? Your Majesty, you say the same words each time, but the results speak for themselves. Elder Zhao flung his sleeves and harumphed. If you don't trust us, we can leave this instant. There is really no need for you to invite outsiders one after another to render our previous efforts futile. Indeed. Your Majesty, if you don't trust us, we can leave right now. The other elders also chirped in agreement, clearly displeased by Zhong Xian's arrival. Yu Shenqing hurriedly tried to appease them. Of course, I trust you all. Otherwise, I wouldn't have entrusted the most important body saint tree of our Yu clan to you. Elder Zhao harumphed. Your Majesty, if you trust us, we will have to ask you not to invite these kinds of shady figures to interfere with our work. The body saint tree's condition is already very complicated as it is, and we might not be so lucky as to successfully save it the next time someone you invited over screws it up once more. We will try our best, but whether we succeed or not will depend on fate. Over the years, Yu Shenqing had invited many herbologists to take a look at the body saint tree's conditions, and there were plenty of them who had given empty promises, hoping that they could succeed by some stroke of luck and make a name for themselves. However, not only did they fail tragically, they even worsened the body saint tree's state. It was these elders who had to work tirelessly for days in order to stabilize its condition. This was precisely the reason why they felt extremely frustrated whenever Yu Shunqing tried to bring someone new over. Such an emotion was exacerbated when Yu Shunqing introduced a young lad who was barely in his early 20s as someone who possessed a deep understanding of herbology. Like hell they would believe that, even though herbologist wasn't officially recognized as a 9 paths occupation, it did have its own heritage. Similar to the physicians, it was an occupation containing deep wisdom within it, and the knowledge one learned had to be corroborated with practice as well. For a young lad who was barely in his early 20s, even if he had started studying from the day he was born, how much could he possibly have learned? Yu Shunqing was conflicted. If it was in the field of pill forging or smithing, he would harbor no doubts about Zhongshi's capability. But herbology, he really couldn't say for sure. Just as Yu Shunqing was still in a dilemma, not sure who he should side with, the young man beside him ignored everyone and walked straight toward the body saint tree. There was a formation set up around the tree in order to protect it from further harm, but the young man walked past it as if it were non-existent. In just a short moment, he was already standing before the tree. He then raised his hand and placed his palm on its thick trunk. "What are you doing?" Not expecting that young lad to disregard them and head straight for the tree, touching it even, Elder Zhao and the others bellowed furiously. They felt as if their authority had been challenged, and they glared at the young lad in hostility. "I am not doing anything," Zhong Xian replied innocently. After which, he turned to Yu Shunqing and said, "If those fellows want to leave, let them. It's not like they are doing any good around here." The elders immediately lashed out furiously. "What did you say? Lad, where are you from? There are just this many herbologist clans in Hongyuan Empire. Which one are you from? You sure are haughty for someone your age." Yu Shunqing had also brought in plenty of renowned herbologists before, but there were none who had dared disrespect them like that. After all, they were second to none in the field of herbology in Hongyuan Empire. It was one thing for that fellow to have disregarded them and overstepped his bounds, but to question their professionalism on top of that. How dare he? What I said is a fact. It's such a simple illness, but none of you managed to see through it, even saying that it would depend on fate. Are you here to treat the body saint tree or to hasten its death? Zhong Xian replied calmly. He had already noticed some problems when he assessed the tree via the Eye of Insight when he first arrived. However, he wasn't too sure whether his analysis was right or not, so he decided to step forward and check via the Library of Heaven's Path as well. The result was similar to what he had deduced. The illness was, in truth, not very complicated, but it was extremely difficult to diagnose it accurately by examining just the exterior of the tree. "You." Elder Zhao's eyebrows shot up disdainfully as he uttered coldly, "Simple? So, you are saying that you know what illness the body saint tree is suffering from? Speak then, I sure look forward to hearing what comes out of your mouth. Even if I tell you, will you understand?" Zhong Xian replied impassively. Given that these fellows had failed to determine the root of the body saint tree's illness despite spending so much time analyzing and treating it, it was doubtful whether or not they would believe him even if he were to tell them. "You." Elder Zhao and the others felt as if their veins would rupture from sheer rage. As the top herbologists of Hongyuan Empire, they had always been the ones to look down on others. This was the first time in a long while that someone had dared underestimate them like that. "Will we understand, you ask? Lad, does your clan know who you have just provoked? Just wait and see, soon, there won't be a place for you in the circle of herbologists in Hongyuan Empire." Zhong Xian turned to Yu Shunqing and urged, "Your Majesty, the body saint tree's condition is dire, and we can't afford to delay it any longer. Otherwise, it might just die in the hands of these men." "Audacious. You said that the tree will die in our hands. You'd better explain yourself right now, or else I won't let this matter slide." Seeing that the young lad was getting more and more overboard with his words, Elder Zhao stepped forward and glared at the other party menacingly. A powerful aura burst forth from him, as if saying that he wouldn't hesitate to kill the other party should his words turn out to be nonsense. As a top-notch herbologist and a Saint Realm expert, Elder Zhao had always been respected no matter where he went, and even Emperor Yu Shunqing had to speak to him courteously. Yet, this young lad had actually dared to insult him like that. This was completely unacceptable. The 9-9 soul consonance formation, if I am not mistaken, serves to pump spiritual energy into the body saint tree to stimulate its spirit, right? Zhongxian asked calmly. You know the 9-9 soul consonance formation? Elder Zhao was slightly taken aback. Due to the young age and the arrogance of the lad before him, he had already regarded him as one of those incapable fame-seekers. Thus, he hadn't thought that the other party would be able to see through the essence of their treatment so quickly. The 9-9 soul consonance formation was a secret art passed down only among top herbologist clans. It had the ability to stimulate and nurture the spirit within spirit herbs and saint herbs, bringing vitality back to them. Most herbologists weren't even aware of it. From their diagnosis, they had determined the cause of the body saint tree's withering to be the dissipation of its spirit. That was why they had spent such a heavy price to set up this expensive formation, hoping to revitalize its spirit and bring it back to life. But for the young lad to speak in such a manner, could there be a problem with their treatment method? Of course. Not only that, you also gathered the spirit of 18 different saint herbs and tried to forcefully infuse them into the body saint tree, but it ended in failure, Zhongxian said confidently. This. Elder Zhao and the other herbologists traded gazes, stumped by the situation before them. The other party was right. They had thought that they could swiftly revitalize the tree's spirit by infusing the spirits of other saint herbs into it, but the attempt had ended in a failure. As the result was unsatisfactory, they hadn't reported this matter to Yu Shenqing, so it was only known among them. How did this fellow learn of it? Did he deduce it with just a glance? But that was impossible. Matters regarding spirits and souls had always been an enigma to most of mankind. It might still be possible to deduce that a successful spirit infusion had occurred by looking at the spirit of the medicinal herb, but if it had been a failure, not even top herbologists like them would be able to discern it. How could the young lad before them deduce it accurately? This body saint tree has yet to die, and its spirit is still alive and kicking. Yet, you attempted to infuse another spirit into it to take over its body. It is really a blessing of the heavens that it hasn't died in your hands yet. To still be acting so arrogantly around here despite that, do you have not the slightest bit of shame? I really do wonder where you get your boldness and confidence from. Zhongxian flung his sleeves majestically. You. Nonsense. We have checked using various means, and the spirit of the body saint tree has definitely disappeared. How could it still be alive? Elder Zhao's face reddened in agitation. Naturally, they understood the implications of a soul infusion, so they had checked over and over again to ensure that their diagnosis was correct. If the body saint tree still retained its spirit, how could they not be aware of it? Another elder stood forward and said, Indeed. I checked for its spirit using the golden needle spirit detection method thrice, and the results were all negative. Furthermore, if its spirit was still around, how could it allow its body to wither like that? Yet another elder nodded in agreement. I also used the exclusive green mist spirit detection method of my lineage, and I can testify that the tree has already lost its spirit. It was common knowledge that saint herbs possessed spirit. If one were to forcefully infuse a spirit into a saint herb that still retained its spirit, that would be practically no different from murdering the herb. If they, who prided themselves on their expertise in the field of herbology, had truly unintentionally killed a herb when they were supposed to save it, they would be too ashamed to continue living. Another elder waved his hands and harumphed. The spirit infusion might have failed, but it sprouted new leaves on the withered tree and alleviated the yellowing of the existent leaves. This is a clear sign of the body saint tree making a recovery. There's really no need for us to listen to the nonsense of an ignorant lad here. The others nodded in agreement to his words. The spirit infusion might have failed, but the fact that it had regained its green glow for even a short moment of time meant that their treatment was effective and they were moving in the correct direction. A clear sign that the body saint tree is making a recovery, you say? The leaves might have turned green, but have you checked the roots? Do they show signs of recovering? What about the tree trunk? Does it look healthier, or did the wither worsen? Zhongxian scoffed. This. The elders immediately fell silent. They had checked the condition of the tree thoroughly after the spirit infusion, and the condition of the roots and the trunks seemed to have worsened considerably. But there was a period of adjustment, so it should be normal to see such conditions, right? The golden needle spirit detection method can indeed check for a herb spirit, but how long is your golden needle? Can it reach the depths of the tree trunk? If the spirit is hidden in the depths, do you think that your detection method will be effective? Zhongxian continued. The elders had no idea how to respond to this either. The golden needle spirit detection method responded only upon direct contact with the spirit. If it had been an ordinary medicinal herb, there wouldn't be any problem. However, considering the massive size of the body saint tree, there was indeed no guarantee that the needle would reach the spirit. Zhongxian turned to the other elder and stated, a similar problem applies for the green mist spirit detection method as well. It works by triggering a response from a conscious spirit, but what if the spirit of the body saint tree is unconscious? Wouldn't the result you receive wrongly reflect that its spirit is dead? Realization struck the elder, and he fell silent as well. To the green mist spirit detection method, an unconscious spirit was deemed to be no different from a dead spirit. An elder abruptly interjected, enough, after all you have said, you still haven't told us how the body saint tree should be treated. If you can't come up with a solution, you are ultimately still the same as us. The others immediately nodded in agreement. The most important thing at hand was to save the body saint tree, everything else was secondary. A solution? Zhongxian chuckled lightly before turning to Yu Shenqing. Your Majesty, I will have to trouble you to get your men to bring some pails of oil and a paper match over. I am going to burn the tree. Paper match, not an official term, is a rolled piece of paper that contains white phosphorus, nitrates, sulfur, and various other ingredients. When unrolled, it will come into contact with the air and light up. It is said to have been created in China in AD 577. Chapter 874 Burn it to burn it. You have been invited here to save the tree, not to burn it down. Ridiculous. This is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. Who doesn't know how to kill a tree? Do we still need you for that? Everyone was stunned for an instant after hearing Zhongxian's words before bellowing furiously. There must be something wrong with your head. You spoke as if we were completely useless, but when asked for a solution, you proposed to burn the tree instead. The body saint tree was the very foundation of the Yu clan, and the herbologists had used every means at their disposal to treat it desperately, fearing that their failure would result in their heads being lopped off. That young lad had spoken as if he had some incredible means up his sleeves, but to think that the solution he proposed would be to burn down the tree. This was utter insanity. Yu Shenqing's body shook, and he nearly fainted on the spot as well. Watching Zhongshe render the elders in the room speechless with his words earlier, he had seen a glimmer of hope for the body saint tree. But after hearing his solution, he realized that the other party was just toying with him. The body saint tree was already on the verge of death. If it were to be burned down, wouldn't it lose its life immediately? Noticing Yu Shenqing's hesitation, Zhongxian's eyebrows shot up. I won't force you if you don't trust me. However, if you wish to save the body saint tree, you'd better make your decision quickly. Save? Yu Shenqing's lips twitched. Are you sure that you are really saving the body saint tree and not murdering it? That's right. Zhongxian nodded before placing his hands behind his back and waiting patiently. Seeing the grim look on Zhongshe's face, it didn't seem like the other party was joking around. After a moment of hesitation, Yu Shenqing turned around to the old eunuch, Luo Fu, and instructed, do as Zhongshe says. Even though he still thought that it was ridiculous to burn down the tree, the fact that Zhongxian was the principal of the Master Teacher Academy, along with the various incredible feats he had achieved, still convinced him to trust the other party this once. More importantly, those elders had been here for 2 years, but there wasn't the slightest improvement in the body saint tree's condition. It would be no exaggeration to say that the tree's death timer had already started ticking. Since Zhongshe was so confident in the matter, perhaps it was worth giving his method a try, especially since there was no better solution at hand. If the tree still died eventually, it could only be said to be its fate. Your Majesty, I beseech you to reconsider your options. Don't listen to the lies of this fellow. The body saint tree is already in a very feeble state, It won't be able to survive being burned. Seeing that Yu Shenqing had really instructed his men to bring oil and a paper match over, Elder Zhao and the others immediately panicked, and they rushed forward to advise him otherwise. Please calm down. Zhong Shi is the PR, a very talented master teacher from the Master Teacher Academy. I believe there is a reason why he made such a decision. Yu Shenqing was just about to reveal Zhong Xian's other identity when he suddenly realized that this matter was supposed to remain a secret until the inauguration ceremony, so he could only quickly change his words. Seeing that Yu Shenqing was being beguiled by the young lad, Elder Zhao exclaimed in agitation, I don't deny that master teachers are knowledgeable and discerning, but in the field of herbology, there is no one who can top us in Hongyuan Empire, and none of us here have ever heard of a saint herb being saved by being burned. They came from the top herbology clans with long heritages behind them. The wisdom of their predecessors had been passed down from one generation to the next, forming incredible compendiums of knowledge. Yet, despite being the successors of these compendiums of knowledge, none of them had ever heard of a herb being saved through burning. That was no different from drinking poison to alleviate one's thirst, a concept that completely went against the theories of herbology. It was something that could never happen. Indeed, each occupation has its own experts, and even master teachers can't possibly be knowledgeable about every single occupation in the world. After all, there is only one Kongshu, another elder added. Legend had it that on top of being the founder of the Master Teacher Pavilion, Kongshu had been skilled in many occupations as well. In fact, the heritage of many existing occupations had been compiled and organized by him. The young lad before them might be a formidable master teacher, but even master teachers weren't capable of everything. There were times when they, too, would fail. Hearing the words of the elders, Yu Shenqing's determination began to waver. However, thinking about Zhong Xian's identity, he eventually still gritted his teeth and said, Say no more, I have already made up my mind. Let's just do as Zhong Shi instruct. While they were talking, the palace attendants had already brought pails of oil and a paper match into the room. Zhong Xian, upon seeing that Yu Shenqing was willing to put his trust in him at a crucial moment like this, nodded in satisfaction. He instructed the palace attendants to spill the pails of oil all over the tree, and when that was done, he blew on the paper match to light it up. In no haste to ignite the oil, Zhong Xian turned to the herbologists in the room and said, There are countless herbologist clans in the world, and they each have their unique ways of cultivating and treating medicinal herbs. While you all might be considered to be the best herbologists in Hongyuan Empire, do you really believe that you have grasped all possible treatment methods in the world? Elder Zhao and the others fell silent. The pursuit of knowledge is an endless race. Every day, new things were being discovered, and new heritages were being formed. Who would dare say that they had already seen it all? Not even Kongshu would dare to arrogantly declare so. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been rendered speechless by the words of two young children while passing through a remote country back then. The spirit of the body saint tree is not dead but asleep. You rushed into treating it without checking its condition thoroughly, nearly causing its death. Forget it, just watch and see. Shaking his head, Zhong Xian threw the paper match over. Hoo. As soon as the paper match came into contact with the oil, the entire tree immediately burst into flames. He really is burning the tree. The mouths of Elder Zhao and the others twitched uncontrollably. After spending 2 years with the body saint tree, they already possessed some feelings for it. Thus, they couldn't help but feel a stabbing pain in their hearts as they watched the flames gradually devouring the tree. Yu Shenqing also couldn't help but clench his fists tightly as he watched the flames. At this point, he really didn't know whether he was right or not to trust Zhong Xian. On the other hand, Zhong Xian was staring at the flames intently, seemingly waiting for the right moment. Shortly after, he raised his hand and said, Extinguish the flames. Yes. A few guards immediately rushed forward and stifled the flames around the body saint tree with their zhenqi. Even the weakest of them was at the ethereal treading realm, and with their strength combined, it took barely more than a moment for them to extinguish the flames. With the flames gone, everyone got a clear glimpse of the current state of the body saint tree. At this point, its exterior was charred black, and there wasn't the slightest hint of life from it. Without saying a word, Zhongxian walked up to the tree and began striking it at certain locations while circling around it. After striking it consecutively 36 times, he finally came to a halt. Just as everyone was wondering what Zhongxian was up to, the latter returned to Yu Shenqing and the other's side and snapped his finger. Catcher! Catcher! The charred exterior of the tree abruptly burst apart. This. How is this possible? The sight that unfolded before their eyes left everyone stupefied. Beneath the charred exterior of the tree was a tree trunk only about an arm thick, but it was overflowing with vitality, like a young sprout blossoming from the old tree. It was just that it had been hidden beneath its withered exterior previously. But considering how the exterior was already nearing death, how could the insides of the tree still remain so vibrant? This sight was mystifying, and there was no one who could comprehend what was going on. Elder Zhao and the others had diagnosed and treated many herbs in their time, but they had never encountered or even heard of such a scenario before. Seeing the looks of incomprehension on the faces around him, Zhongxian explained calmly, "It isn't because this body saint tree is nearing death that it is unconscious. Instead, it was out of self-preservation by the spirit to protect its foundation that it chose to conceal itself in the core of the tree. As a result, the external layer was no longer sustained by the spirit, thus resulting in its death-like state. You overlooked this and forcefully infused another spirit into it. Through doing that, you nearly destroyed its remaining foundation. If you had really succeeded then, the body saint tree would have already died by now." The bodies of Elder Zhao and the others shuddered in astonishment. The other party was right. Under the condition that the current spirit hadn't died yet, if a new spirit were to be infused into the body, it would result in a huge fight, and in the worst-case scenario, the two spirits might just end up killing one another. In other words, it was truly a blessing that they hadn't succeeded then. Otherwise, they would have been the culprits behind the body saint tree's death. But Zhongshe, the body saint tree has been perfectly fine for many years. Why would it suddenly need to resort to a self-preservation maneuver? Yu Shenqing asked, puzzled. The others also turned doubtful gazes to Zhongxian as well. I am not too sure about that either. Under normal circumstances, a spirit will only do that if it has suffered severe injuries. Try recalling this. In the period of time just before the body saint tree started to wither, did anything happen? Zhongxian said. The Library of Heaven's Path had reflected the flaws of the body saint tree, but it didn't delve into the reason for its condition, so he wasn't too sure either. I don't think that anything major happened in that period of time. Yu Shenqing frowned. 2 years ago. That should be around the time when the old principal of the Master Teacher Academy went missing. Oh right, the vice head of the physician school, Yu Shu, visited once in that period of time to procure a seedling from the tree, saying that he wanted to try cultivating it to help locate the old principal's soul. Other than that, I don't think that there are any outsiders who have approached the tree. Yu Shu. Zhongxian frowned. That fellow was the culprit behind Wei Changfeng's death, and in order to let Wei Ruyan exact vengeance for her father personally, he had the other party imprisoned in his own manor for the time being. Was the other party related to this incident as well? That's right. Vice School head Yu Shu is a talented herbologist himself, so I invited him over to take a look at the body saint tree's condition as well, but he wasn't able to tell what was wrong with it either, Yu Shenqing replied. I see. Forget it, let's put that matter aside for now. For the time being, we should find a way to awaken the spirit from its slumber first. Zhongxian said.